Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff this week on the show. We are talking a crap ton of video game news. Video game news everywhere. There was a Nintendo Direct. There was a State of Play. That's the PlayStation thing. There was the Tokyo Game Show. Genshin Impact had some fairly big news. I think it's maybe a slight understatement to say. Assassin's Creed had some news last week that we didn't catch up on, but we're going to catch up on now. It's been a busy time, and we are just going to clear the deck today and talk some video game news. We didn't do an E3 episode over the summer, so this is your... because there was no E3. But also, this is your consolation prize for that. I think that's more than fair.
Yeah, we are definitely, at this point, full on in the era where video game news is not consolidated to a single point of the year. Because I would argue, especially if you are into Japanese games, this is like... to me, was more substantive than the Summer Games Fest and Gamescom and a lot of stuff that happened in the more traditional E3 timeframe. This was, to me, like, there were a lot of cool games announced and a lot of interesting stuff. And there was something about all of it being concentrated right here, much later than your E3 timeline, that felt like, okay, E3 is really gone. I know that they're going to they're saying they're going to have an E3 again, but it feels like we are past the need for every single game announcement to be in early June at this point.
And at this point, I mean, what is E3? E3 is not Nintendo, it's not Sony, so it's Microsoft and Ubisoft maybe, and sometimes EA, but like, it's just not that much stuff.
Yeah, and so I just had that feeling when Nintendo had its thing and then the State of Play happened. And then Tokyo Game Show was like the next day. I was like, oh, this is as much as what Jeff Keighley got for his Summer Games Fest thing, if not more.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and a lot of exciting stuff too. So I'm excited to talk about this. This will be both our news and our topic this week. So Sean, let's go ahead and kick it off with the stuff. What have you been up to?
I've been grading. It is the end of the first 6 weeks of the semester, and that's when a lot of, like, there's a huge grading deadline because there's a lot of stuff with, like, the district needs certain amounts of data of how many students are failing, the, like, academics or athletics programs need to know for whether or not students can participate and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of grading, and then there was a, like, standardized test that Texas really, really likes its standardized tests. There are a lot of them.
I've heard.
So we did a standardized test, and part of that was some short answer responses that I had to grade by hand. So that was mostly my week, was grading, playing a little bit of Genshin Impact, and watching Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. I think that is basically all I've done for the past 7 days.
I've done a couple different things. One thing I've done that's interesting is I did start a new playthrough of God of War 2018.
Very good.
Which you just recently replayed. I've been wanting to make time for that. And there's a real video game crunch coming up. October and November are insane, especially if you own a Nintendo Switch. So I'm going to knock God of War out now. I'm playing some other things like Genshin on the side. I kind of want to do it before Genshin 3.1 comes out. Also. But yeah, that game is still amazing. You are absolutely right from something you said earlier, Sean. If you play that on the higher difficulties, the beginning of that game is a almost ludicrous gauntlet.
Yes, it is. It is not balanced for the harder difficulties at the very, very beginning when you do not have most of your kit yet.
It feels like it's supposed to be for New Game Plus, but I don't really want to do that. I want to have like the discovery of everything. So yeah, I'm like desperately trying to get through to like, let me have my skill tree, please, and like all of that. You know, I don't remember if that really has a skill tree, but you know, it has all the RPG mechanics, right?
Yes, yeah, it does. It has like a very like it's such a light skill tree. I don't even know if you'd really call it a skill tree because it's just like the combos for the two different weapons. But yes, yeah, once you get like out into exploring the Lake of Nine and get like a little bit through that, like I think it was by the time I went to Alfheim was where I felt like, okay, now the difficulty has evened out to where it is still hard because it is on the hardest difficulty, but it is not impossibly hard, which is what the early sections of that game feel like.
Yeah, and I'm one step below the hardest difficulty. It's still very tough.
Yes.
But it's still very fun. That game, I was reflecting on this week, just looking at it, and I've been thinking a lot about, like, you know, there's been some news that we haven't touched on here, like the PS5 is raising its price in most of the world. And, just you've had things like Resident Evil 4. The remake is now doing a last-gen port as well as the next-gen stuff. And it just, there's more and more signs that, like, okay, the next generation has not started. And I don't know when it will. I feel like we're at a point now where the PS4 and PS5 generation is one long thing, and hopefully at some point there will be a break, and it's disappointing there hasn't been, because the PS5 and the Series X are a much bigger technological leap than we've had in recent consoles. But we just haven't seen that in game design yet, other than in some stuff like Ratchet and Clank. But you go back to God of War, which is 2018, it's 4 years old. That game feels next-gen to me still. Like, it feels like it's from the future. And it looks very nice. It's beautiful in 4K. The HDR in that game is gorgeous. It's got, phenomenal voice acting and all those, like, production values. But it's like less that, and it's more what it's doing conceptually with the unbroken shot aesthetic, where there are no cuts other than, like, pause menus and quitting the game for the night and coming back the next day, or dying. But it is all presented fluidly, and then they also do crazy things like sending Kratos, flying through the air a mile, and he just gets right back up and you're playing. Or, the entire thing with I forget the name, the Baldur, whoever the villain of the name is.
Yeah,
is it Baldur? Yeah. Who you meet early on and have the fight with, and it's just an incredible technical showcase. But it's basically like, Santa Monica Studio and the director Cory Barlog, I think, conceptualized something that basically was impossible on the existing hardware, and then they made it work anyway. And that's what feels next-gen about it to me, is that it was imagining something beyond the boundaries of the technology. Because the entire idea of a one-shot thing with no cuts, that's very rare in cinema. You get it a little more now with digital cameras, but I think the digital era has shown us the barrier to doing long, unbroken shots isn't really technology. It's the imagination and high degree of difficulty involved in doing that. And they figured out a way to kind of extend that through an entire game. And just, that's the kind of stuff that I look at that game and I still feel like, oh, this is a next generation thing, more so than, like, we have games that on the PS5 that just look nicer and have higher frame rates, right? Like, this feels next gen.
Yeah, I kind of had a similar feeling when I replayed it, that that game has, even though that game is 4 years old, which is like almost as long as an old console generation used to be back in the day.
Yes.
It used to be about 4 to 5 years. That game does not feel like it has aged at all to me. Obviously it does not look as pretty as, like, Ratchet and Clank or Miles Morales in a technical sense. There's no ray tracing. It doesn't have some of that, like, next-gen spit and polish. If you're playing it on PS5, you're playing the PS4 game with an unlocked frame rate that hits a smooth 60, and it's, like, at a higher resolution. But it is not, it's not Spider-Man remastered or anything like that. But just in that sort of, as you're saying, the game design sense, it's so superbly excellent at what it is trying to do that it still just feels like it is at that sort of, like, cutting edge level 4 years later, which is, I found hugely impressive when I played it.
Yeah, it's imagining a different kind of video game language than I think we've seen in a big 3D game like this, because I think one instinct with a game like this is to say, oh, it's cinematic. And it's cinematic because it has big vistas, and it has the amazing Bear McCreary music, and all these things that feel like, it's got the big performances and action, and that stuff feels cinematic to us. But it's presenting it in a way that, like, cinema, just the idea of, like, an 18-hour unbroken shot in a movie it's just literally impossible, right? And it's that kind of thing that where, okay, it's not cinematic, it's actually deeply gamic, and that's really interesting. It's like, it's taking a lot of cinematic language and then cutting out the key piece of cinematic language, which is editing, and saying, okay, we can do that without this. It's going to be very technically difficult, but we can do this, and it's a really interesting thing that they've done. And I'm excited to see what they do with Ragnarok, which will still in some ways be limited to PS4 hardware because it is a cross-gen game, but, a couple more years of technological developments, who the hell knows what that's going to be like.
Yeah, I think replaying it made me feel like I don't really mind that Ragnarok is cross-gen, because it's like, obviously it'd be awesome to have just the pure PS5 version of God of War, but playing the game was like, it's, a sequel to this game still on the same fundamental technological platform, that still sounds really fucking good. Yeah.
What do you think, by the way, about just because I brought it up earlier, and I think it's an interesting conversation we haven't had, seeing that Sony is hiking the price of the PS5 through most of the world. It's by about $50 depending on where you are. $50 obviously with your local bucks. And, this is relatively unprecedented. Nintendo arguably did this because the Switch OLED is more expensive than the existing ones. And usually when you do a mid-cycle refresh where you improve things, you keep the price the same, you don't raise it. But obviously we are in a period of global inflation, so it is not crazy on that level. And obviously the PS5, demand has vastly outstripped supply.
Yeah.
So it makes sense on that level. But it does feel like a certain Rubicon being crossed.
Yeah, I mean, because a week or two before that announcement came out, also Facebook/Meta announced that the Oculus Rift, whatever the current model of Oculus Rift is, had its price raised by $100, and that was for every market. And that was where, when I saw that, I was like, oh shit, because yes, in most industries, prices getting raised is not a thing that has never happened before. For video games, it almost never happens, and for hardware, I don't think it's ever really happened. I'm sure in specific markets, in very specific circumstances, I'm sure there are examples, but I've never seen a big public example of it that is oh, okay, the Xbox 360 is now $50 to $100 more, without it being at least disguised the way that Nintendo disguised theirs. I mean, make no mistake, Nintendo hiked the price of the Switch. The Switch OLED cost less for them to manufacture than the original Switch did when that came out, when it was new. But they're able to disguise that price hike by at the very least they are giving you a better thing, even if on the back end their profit margins increase because they've increased the price of it. But that's a slightly different thing than just here's the exact same product, we're now increasing the overall prices on it. The only place where we really see that is on the software side, where video games software prices and the standard there shifts over 10 years or so. We constantly are getting this, oh, it's $50, now it's $60, now it's down, now it's up, now we're at 70 is becoming the new standard. Yeah, so it's weird because you just don't really see it in video games where hardware gets a big price increase. But I feel for me, I don't feel like I know enough about the conditions of the markets and inflation and all of that, of the factors that went in to comment intelligently on them raising the price, right? That's where I look at it, I'm it feels bad, but I also look at it, I'm but I don't know the factors involved, because I don't know, I'm not an economist, right? And that was where I looked at that kind of stuff, and I was like, this feels weird, but I don't know how to dissect it.
Right. And, part of the global inflation market right now, if you listen to economists, it is reductive to say that inflation only exists because corporations are getting greedy and hiking prices, right? Mm-hmm. But it is accurate to say that the, overall atmosphere of inflation has emboldened some corporations who might not need to inflate their prices to inflate their prices. Because if everyone's doing it, get in on the party, basically, right? And again, I don't know the specific conditions at Sony or with that, or, why it was in most markets but not the United States, which could be coming, who knows. It's such a weird scenario. I think the thing I'm more interested in than the economics is just, we are coming up on the second-year anniversary of the PS5, mm-hmm. and it's still, it is such a transformative piece of tech compared to the PS4, but it has so far for these 2 years existed as the PS4 Pro 2. And I'm just very curious when or if this generation actually comes into its own, what that will look like, what will happen, what the conditions would need to be for that to happen. At what point can you go to a Best Buy and buy a PS5 in store? Maybe never. Who the hell knows? It's a very weird scenario.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely a win. It's not an if. I think, because one of the things is that we are at the point where, in most markets, this is not going to be true everywhere because of, the different levels of availability, but let's just say in the US, PS5 sales outstrip by a large margin, on average, the sale of the equivalent game on the PS4. Because the most enthusiastic buyers of video games are going to be the ones who are upgrading. And so while there are like 100 million more PS4s out there than PS5s, most of those people don't buy more than maybe one video game a year.
Right.
And so, like, I think we are probably 1 to 2 years away. Like, I don't think it's like a thing where it's like, oh, it's going to be 2026 before that shift happens. But I think part of what we are seeing is that it is both the hardware side and like the shipping and the manufacturing and all that stuff got hit by both COVID and lots of other shit like the semiconductor shortage. But then also game development has been delayed by at least a year, if not longer, by the shift of development with COVID, right? And like that is where we are now seeing games that were designed to come out within the first year of the launch of the console is now coming out at the end of the second year, if not into the third year of the console, like a God of War Ragnarok, which is a cross-gen game because it was designed to be a PS4 game upgraded to be a PS5 game, right? Like that game started development in 2018, and it's not coming out until the end of 2022.
Yeah. It's just it's a fascinating, like, kind of macro scenario with the overall video game market that I'm curious to see how it continues to unfold. We're just in a very weird place. And that'll be also in a lot of the news we're going to talk about. A lot of things have shifted, right? So, yeah. Anyway, God of War, PlayStation 5, that's what I've been up to. Playing a lot more Splatoon 3. Splatoon 3 is great. I am loving the multiplayer. I'm really loving the campaign. The campaign is, now that I've played a good chunk of it, I can definitely say it is the sequel to the Octo expansion from Splatoon 2. It is not a sequel to the like base game single player from Splatoon 1 and 2. It is very much the Octo expansion, but now as a full new standalone, video game campaign, and it is remarkable. I think the Nintendo game I would compare it most to is Super Mario Galaxy, just in terms of the kind of quick pace of each level, of the mission scenarios, of the sheer variety of the play with physics, stuff like that. But obviously it's not a perfect comparison because Mario Galaxy doesn't have a squid kid with a ink gun. It has an Italian boy with a big belly and a jump, and a bee costume. So it's a little different, but yeah, if you like any of that kind of thing, Splatoon 3 is worth it entirely just for that single player campaign is so good. Including having, some of these incredible challenge levels that are like properly difficult and interesting and cerebral. And then the multiplayer is just a blast. I've seen some consternation about there are some technical difficulties on the multiplayer, but I will say, in my experience, and I've been playing a lot of it, and I've been playing the multiplayer a lot with my brother, so we're in a friend group, doing matchmaking. There are disconnects that happen where sometimes you're in a game and it gets dropped and everyone goes back to the lobby. And sometimes you're in the lobby and matchmaking fails. I will say, I think that's a fairly common thing for a new multiplayer-like game at launch. I don't know. Maybe I don't play enough, but the ones I do play, usually that to a worse degree. And two, Splatoon matchmaking is so fast, in part because the matches are only 3 minutes long, in part because I think they do the thing where they limit it to 2 maps at a time, and it's all very smooth. My experience of, like, getting in a game with my brother, or matchmaking with my brother, then getting in a game, playing the game, going on to the next one. It's so fast and it's so smooth. They have this really cool thing between games where you're in this little room and you can test out your gun and practice, and there's targets and all sorts of stuff for you to play around with. It's just incredibly smooth and frictionless, and if there is a disconnect and I get kicked out of the game, you hit like 2 buttons and you're playing again in like 30 seconds. So, I don't know. In a world where like I've suffered through Halo Infinite matchmaking and I can't play Call of Duty Modern Warfare anymore because the launcher is so broken on Xbox that you can't download the requisite stuff to get into multiplayer, I will take the occasional disconnect followed by 5 seconds of reconnecting. I'm okay with that.
I mean, to be fair to Modern Warfare, the matchmaking in that game was great. The problem was you can't get to it anymore because they had tried to turn that game into a thing it was not designed to be made for. Yeah, because yes, Halo Infinite was the last new game that I played multiplayer stuff on, and that game certainly did not have great online systems. The Master Chief Collection, though, that's good matchmaking. It is interesting that good, like matchmaking feels like it is a thing that every game should just be very, very good at, and it is still a complete crapshoot. Some games are great, Some games, like Halo Infinite, are not. And I was very surprised when I played Halo Infinite. I was like, oh, you have like a lot of basic stuff that doesn't work well. Like, oh, at the end of every single match, you kick me all the way back to the main menu, and I have to start from there and go through the 5-second timer at the end of every single match. You don't just have a rolling lobby like what video games have had since like 2007. A lot of that kind of stuff. Yeah, again, it's a thing that feels like most games should be really good at. Some games aren't. Sounds like Splatoon 3, pretty good at it.
I think it's above average. It's a simpler game than Halo or Overwatch or, whatever multiplayer game you play, because there's less loadout stuff to deal with and fewer modes and that sort of thing. But it is, I will say, I mostly, when I play Splatoon, I'm playing Splatoon. I'm not thinking about how do I fix this weird technical glitch to get matched with my friend. My friend is online, but he's not showing up in my friends list. What do I do? How do I send an invite? I've never had those problems. It's oh, we got disconnected. Let me reconnect. We're fine. That doesn't bother me that much, to be honest. So there you go. And I think this is a good transition into the news section, Sean, because the first piece of news I want to do is I want to talk about the sales for Splatoon 3, because this feels like this could be some kind of sea change for Nintendo. We don't have sales for the rest of the world, but we do have sales for Japan. And the sales figures for Japan, Famitsu gave the box numbers, and then Nintendo themselves, because it was so big, they bragged about the actual digital plus physical numbers. In its first 3 days on the market, opening weekend, Splatoon 3 sold 3.5 million units in Japan. That includes 2 million boxed retail copies. That is by far the highest launch for a Switch game, nearly doubling the last record, which was Animal Crossing New Horizons on Switch, which had about 1.8 million units in its opening weekend. And as far as we can tell, that is the record for any game launch in Japan. Splatoon 2's lifetime sales in Japan were only 4 million units. And this almost beat that in one weekend. Splatoon 1 worldwide was 4.5 million units. Splatoon 3 certainly beat that in its first weekend worldwide. It would have to have bombed everywhere not to have done that. So that's incredible. That just, to me, that speaks to like Splatoon 2 was a Switch launch year game, and Splatoon 3 is out in a world where there are 100 million Switches out there. And they did something right in the marketing, I guess. But that is fucking wild, and I really wonder what impact that has on the kinds of games Nintendo makes in the future. Because, boy, do more like that if you're seeing those numbers.
Yeah, because I've known that Splatoon is very, very popular in Japan, because I watched some Japanese game streamers, and every single one I have ever watched references Splatoon at some point. Like, it's clearly a very popular game. They are all playing Splatoon 3 right now, which is something where I think Splatoon is cool. It's not a game I like watching people play, so it's kind of a bummer for me, because I'm like, well, I like to put that stuff on in the background when I'm like doing work and stuff, and then Splatoon is just not that interesting a game, I think, to watch. But anyways, yeah, so it's a thing I've known is very popular, but I don't think anyone could have predicted like it exploding that much in Japan immediately. It's pretty insane.
If you did a big Western AAA game launch and it sold 3.5 million worldwide in a month, you'd be very happy.
Yeah.
This is 3 days in one launch country. Now, it's Nintendo's, biggest market in a lot of ways, but, like, still, holy crap. But that's just, I really, you were talking last week, Sean, about you kind of wish Nintendo did more stuff like Splatoon. I feel like those numbers, there must be a meeting at Nintendo in this last week of, like, well, other than more Splatoon games, what can we do here? Because it feels like that is an audience that was hungry for some kind of big, unique, 4-quadrant multiplayer experience on the Switch. And I would be like, how do we move heaven and earth to do more of that? Because, boy, it talk about having a, like I said, starved audience. That's what that says to me.
Yeah, and then they're going to be like, okay, now this time, boys, let's make ARMS 2. And then they'll make ARMS 2. It'll come out to a very muted response. Like, people won't think it's terrible, but they're not going to think it's that amazing. And they're like, well, I guess, it's just Splatoon. We'll never try something new ever again. Eventually, Splatoon 4 will come out, and that'll be amazing, and that'll be the time we make ARMS 3.
At the very least, I have to say, between the success of Splatoon 3 and the just genuinely unprecedented success of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is basically like in the same league as Grand Theft Auto 5 and Minecraft at this point.
Yeah.
Why have they not made like another F-Zero? Why do we not have like more racing like first party games on Switch? I feel like that could be huge. Also, just because like, you know, franchises that were riskier for Nintendo in previous generations have proved to sell like gangbusters on Switch, like Metroid. You know, I'm sure there's like Pikmin 4 was announced at the Direct we'll talk about. I'm really curious, does Pikmin just like take off into the stratosphere this time? A game that has always been kind of niche for Nintendo, because the Switch, there's just no franchise they've had that hasn't done well. I would get creative, like go into your catalog and maybe do some new stuff. What's an offshoot or something like Splatoon that isn't ARMS? ARMS was a valiant attempt, didn't really work. What else can we do?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that they don't go into their war chest of IPs and they just say, let's fucking make a new thing. Maybe that's what people like about Splatoon. I think what they like about Splatoon is that it is new, so it's like it's new and it's like stylish in the ways that it is new, right? It's not a thing that you're like banking on people having powerful Nintendo nostalgia for, like a Mario Kart in terms of like the aesthetic appeal. So Splatoon has its own like kind of modern aesthetic appeal, but then also I think the multiplayer piece is a really big thing. And like Japan's gaming market has become more and more into online gaming in the way that like in Japan, online multiplayer stuff took a lot longer to become popular than it did over here. But now games like Apex Legends is hugely popular in Japan, and PC gaming is becoming much more popular. So I think that like you're seeing that like adoption of like the newer generations of gamers in Japan of online multiplayer as like the new norm. I think that's a big part of like what fuels some of Splatoon's popularity, because also the Switch is effectively the only meaningfully big game platform in Japan outside of phones. It's phones and the Switch. You know, PS4 gets some niche stuff. The PC gets some niche stuff. I'm sure there's someone that owns an Xbox somewhere. But it is effectively just the Switch. And then obviously like gacha games on your mobile phone. And so they kind of just own that market at this point. So if a big multiplayer game comes out, every person who's interested in playing online multiplayer in Japan is going to buy that game.
Yeah, absolutely. Which also, it perpetually confuses me why the long-promised Genshin Impact Switch port has not materialized yet, because that feels like that's a peanut butter and jelly scenario for video game sales. Just, they go together.
Yeah, I wonder if they were like at like some impasse with that, of where they're like, do we upgrade the mobile version or do we downgrade the PC version? What do you do? What do you take to the Switch? I wonder because you know, I imagine that it is not. While Genshin Impact is definitely scalable, it is, I'm sure, not trivial to try to like port that over to the Switch, which is certainly probably not as powerful as actually my smartphone is. Now that I even think about it,
it depends. Yeah, I mean but you know, Genshin has for the mobile versions, it runs so good on some mobile chipsets, particularly Apple's, but also on some of the newer, you know, Samsung chips like the Gen 8, Gen 1, I don't know what it is. It's Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 is the one that is the new, like, kind of more powerful one. But yeah, anyway, that I feel like you could make it run on the Switch reasonably well. But yeah, it is probably a major question. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it feels like a kind of slam dunk for let's make money. Which, hey, I don't make any money off of that. I would lose money to that. But there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's Splatoon. We'll do more Nintendo in a second, but Sean, do you want to catch us up on the news from Assassin's Creed last week, which both of us last week on the podcast said we were confused by? You decided to do a deep dive, so would you like to explain to me what the fuck is going on with Assassin's Creed?
I'll do my best. I think it is confusing. I think so. The thing that Ubisoft did, they had what they call a Ubisoft Forward, I guess is what these things are called. And it's where they showed off just Assassin's Creed stuff. I don't believe Ubisoft had a like dedicated event this summer. If they did, I don't remember what they would have shown. So I'm pretty sure this is like it. Ubisoft has been very quiet lately. I think both because, you know, they're still, you know, reeling from like all their upper management being horrible abusers. And then also clearly, as with most studios, the work from home shift hit them, I think, really hard. But so this is an Assassin's Creed focused thing, and they announced, because I've pulled up Game Informer's thing to help me navigate this. There is 1, 2, if you count Infinity, 3, 4, 5 new Assassin's Creed games, and then there's a DLC for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So they announced a lot of stuff. The overall gist is that Assassin's Creed is going to start moving to a new kind of hub thing called Assassin's Creed Infinity. This is something that was leaked by Jason Schreier at Bloomberg like a year plus ago. We talked about it on the podcast when it leaked. I feel like that article that he wrote is actually more like detailed and informative than what they said about Assassin's Creed Infinity here. But the gist of it is that Assassin's Creed Infinity is a program that is a hub. Like, you maybe can think of it as an Assassin's Creed launcher that their future Assassin's Creed games are going to hook into. And they want this Infinity thing for a couple of reasons. One is that they are offloading the terrible modern day storyline stuff in Assassin's Creed into this hub. They're looking to bring back Assassin's Creed multiplayer in some form, and which was something that used to be in the series up till 3, I think was the last one that had it. And Assassin's Creed multiplayer was pretty cool. It was very unique. So they're looking to try to bring that back.
I know Black Flag had it because I played a little bit of it.
Okay, then 4 would have been the last one then. I think Unity had a multiplayer, but it was it was like a co-op thing. So I think the like versus multiplayer where you were hiding as NPCs, I'm pretty sure 4 then would have been the last one. So they're looking to bring back some form of Assassin's Creed multiplayer, which would come out of Infinity in some way. But then also they're looking to make both big new Assassin's Creed games in the like Origin style, but then also smaller, more focused Assassin's Creeds, a little bit more like the classic Assassin's Creed games, that then those would kind of coexist in this hub program. And so that's what they talked about with Infinity. I think a tricky thing about talking about all of these games at their Assassin's Creed thing is that they showed nothing about it. So the only things they really showed that you can like get a concrete grasp on was a trailer for one of the games, but everything else is just stuff they talked about, which is one of the reasons why it's very confusing. So they didn't show Infinity, they didn't show how it worked, they just talked about it. But I think just to talk about this concept for a little bit, I think it's like an interesting idea. I like that they're trying to do different things with Assassin's Creed, and I'm very, very happy that they are bunting the fucking modern day shit out of those games and just putting it in its own little narrative ghetto in the Assassin's Creed Infinity Hub. And if you want to interrupt your Assassin's Creed experience unceremoniously after the end of like a major point in the game and then go want to run around in the modern world for like 10 minutes and get useless exposition before you start playing your actual game again, now you can do that of your own accord in Assassin's Creed Infinity without the games forcing you to do it all the time.
Can we just dunk on the people who won't shut up about how much they love the fucking modern day shit and are always sad when they don't do it more in these games? What kind of sad lives do these people lead that, like, their mission in life is to, like, be sad at Ubisoft for not doing more with the modern day shit in games that are not about modern day shit, that are literally sold, people buy them and play them because you get to go to cool historical environments, not so they can interrupt, rip the game out of your hands, and make you walk really slowly through a sterile, cold room in a big building to hear exposition about a story that, unless you've played every second of every one of these games, including weird mobile offshoots, you will have no idea what is going on.
Yeah, it's the thing with Assassin's Creed that it used to be in the state of where, like, the modern day stuff had potential. And that's what, you know, as someone who was a fan of Assassin's Creed in the olden times, in, like, let's say 2007 to 2012/13, when there was an ongoing storyline in the modern day stuff with Desmond, that was like, it was bad. You know, it was very bad, particularly the first Assassin's Creed game. It was incredibly infuriating because there was nothing to do in the modern day stuff. They just ripped you out at the end of every assassination. But it was always, like, interesting. And so you thought, like, conceptually, this is interesting. It's executed terribly, but I like the idea of it if they did it well. And it was always that thing of, you were like, and eventually they're going to do the modern day Assassin's Creed where you just play as Desmond in, like, a modern city. And that's going to be one of the games. That's going to be Assassin's Creed 4 or something. That's like what everyone assumed the franchise was going. And I think it was probably what the original plan was. Assassin's Creed's story went, like, horribly off the rails at the end of Brotherhood, where they killed one of the two characters they had. They had Desmond, and they had, I think Rose was the name of the character, his love interest, and then they killed that character at the end of Brotherhood. Spoilers for a game made in 2008. And from that point on, there was nothing they could do with that modern day storyline because they only had one character left, and it was a terrible choice. But anyway, so you had this like thing of where it felt like, well, they're doing it terribly, but it could be cool. And then at the end of Assassin's Creed 3, they kill off Desmond, and the entire modern day storyline effectively comes to a screeching halt. And then they spend the next several games like 4, which has like fun stuff in that it is like a funny satire with the modern day world, but nothing meaningful happens in the narrative. And like, but they kept on still doing it until eventually I stopped playing the games. But as far as I can tell, that is still in that state. I think the lady from Origins has been in a couple of the games at this point, so there's some kind of new ongoing protagonist. But you killed the story. You killed the story like 10 years ago. It's over. They should have, once they decided that Desmond wasn't working out, at that point, that just means the modern day story thing wasn't working out, and you had to get rid of it. And they have just been clinging on to it, and it has been sad as someone who has like led a very happy life since I decided to stop playing Assassin's Creed games, looking at the people still living that life who haven't broken free of that terrible habit, and them still saying the same shit, them still saying, hey, it could be good, it could get interesting, there's a good idea here. It's like, man, it's been like 15 years since this franchise started. You gotta recognize it's never gonna get good. You gotta fucking cut cold turkey, man. Like, you just gotta walk away from it.
Assassin's Creed 3 is 10 years old. It has been 10 years since they made any kind of concerted effort for that to be a thing in these games, but it has stayed around as this vestigial tumor, sometimes benign, sometimes actively harmful, on the body of these games. And I think the people who make these arguments genuinely underrate how much outsiders and people who come into the new Assassin's Creed games are confused by it. Mm-hmm. Like, if you... The average person who goes to play an Assassin's Creed game, and Ubisoft would like for new people to play these games, right? They would... Like any video game company, they don't just want the people who were there in 2007 playing them, because eventually that will go to zero and no one will be playing it, right? Those people don't come in. You don't sell Assassin's Creed Odyssey on the back of whatever modern lady in Egypt is doing. You sell it on, hey, cool stuff in ancient Greece. With Valhalla, you don't sell that on whatever is going on in the modern day story. You sell it on cool Viking shit. And people buy it to do cool Viking shit. And when you get the modern day stuff, it's weird. And I've been in that position because I always wanted to get into Assassin's Creed in the early days, but it was completely impenetrable. You couldn't just jump into Brotherhood or something, right? Like, it was 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, and then 3, right?
Yes.
And it was this long thing, and like 2, I know I've tried to get into 2 several times back in the day, and it starts with this long thing in the modern day that never shuts up, and all of that shit. And then when 4 came out, 4 was a godsend because it's just a cool pirate game, and you could just play it, and the modern day stuff is bad and confusing, but luckily fairly minimal. But like, everyone was like, this is bad and confusing, let me go do pirate stuff. And that game was so good that they've been chasing, that for another 10 years since, with like Skull and Bones and stuff, right? And it's like if the fucking Mario games were advertised the exact way they are now, but at the end of every level, every time Mario gets a star, it cuts out to the real world and it's a sad, fat Italian man sitting at home crying over his dead wife or something. And you find out it's all in his head, and he's imagining himself as a plumber, and his dead wife is Peach, and he's going to go rescue her, and Bowser is the name of his turtle, and it's like, you reveal all of that, and it's just these weird interludes where, like, can I go back to jumping and being a cool raccoon suit dude? Why am I suddenly playing as a sad, real Italian man? This is weird. That's what Assassin's Creed is like, and I'm glad they're dumping it.
Like, Jonathan, you're like, I think, not even... Like your example there is better than what the Assassin's Creed games do. Because the Assassin's Creed games, this was like a thing. I know we definitely talked about this on an ancient podcast like 8 years ago or something when I was still playing these games. But like, part of the problem with Assassin's Creed is that they have a fundamental parallel storyline structure with that setup, with like the framing of, we have this frame narrative, it is our modern day character going into this machine and experiencing the lives of his ancestor. and that you're cutting between these two stories. And any writer would tell you that then there needs to be a thematic link between these two stories. The only game that did that was Assassin's Creed 3. Assassin's Creed 3 was, of all the Assassin's Creed games I played, which is all of them up till halfway through Origins, at which point I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I guess the very ending of Revelations when the game bugged out, and I never played Unity, but nobody played Unity. So most of these games, back in the day, I played. Like, the problem was that it was, here's all the stuff that happens in the past, and then we will give you exposition for a completely unrelated story every few hours or so in the modern day. But there is not going to be any concern or care to connect in any sort of thematic way what is happening between these two elements. It was only 3, which was about fatherhood, right? So in the past, you have Connor in that game, the main character, who is like chasing after his father Hatham, who is the Templar, the main Templar in that game. And so it's all about like his relationship with his father, like parallel to like the birth of America as a country and like the founding fathers and that concept. And then in the modern day, it was Desmond and Desmond's father who was introduced in that game, who was like running the compound that he was in when all that shit is happening. And I'm not going to say that Assassin's Creed 3 is like the greatest game of all time or that's the best Assassin's Creed game. It's not. But I think that game never got enough credit as being the only game that even fucking tried to do it. No other Assassin's Creed game that I played, which again is most of them, ever even tried to do a thematic connection between the parallel storylines. And that, I think, is like the fundamental thing. If you did that, if you found an interesting, compelling way to connect thematically the lives of your modern day protagonist and the ancestor they're living through, then you could do it and it would be great. But they don't even, I don't think they're even really aware of it as like a company that is a problem with their games. And they're just not aware that like, they have no idea why it's bad. So they just keep on repeating the same pattern over and over again because everyone knows there is a way it could be done well. Just Ubisoft has no idea at all what it is. And it was incredibly infuriating and one of the several reasons why I kind of walked away from that franchise for good, because it just drove me completely fucking insane. And so I'm very glad that they're just deciding, hey, we're not going to make it parallel anymore. It's going to exist in its own hub. It's going to be its own thing. I'm curious to see what that looks like and how that like functions in a practical sense. But if all it gives us is that the Assassin's Creed games just get to tell their own story without being interrupted by not a parallel storyline, but a perpendicular storyline, which there's a reason why that is never a term you've heard before because it doesn't exist. If that's what we get, that will be blessing enough. That would be enticing enough that I might play an Assassin's Creed game in the future. If that seems like a thing that worked out well.
You're right. My Mario example was wrong. It would be like if you're playing Mario and you get interrupted at the end of the level with a bunch of Halo lore, right?
Yes.
Like, that's what it would be like. It would be like, who are the Forerunners? Does this have anything to do with the Mario thing? No. It has nothing to do with it.
Yes,
yeah.
That is a much better example.
I took us off the beaten path here. Tell us about what the games that are coming out are. I know in the immediate future we have this thing that was an expansion that's now a standalone game. What's that?
Yes, so there's Assassin's Creed Mirage, which features a character who is from Assassin's Creed Valhalla as the main character. I did not play that game, so I cannot speak anything about that. But it'll be set in Baghdad in 861. So it is going into kind of like that Middle East setting, earlier, but similar to Assassin's Creed 1. And they're also designing the game. This is like the big pitch. Is kind of like a return to classic style Assassin's Creed is the pitch. So it's a more focused single player experience that is not, I'm sure it will be open world to the extent that the old Assassin's Creed games were open world, but not giant action RPG 100 plus hour epic in the style of Assassin's Creed Origins that kind of took on from the Witcher stuff. This will be more of this sort of 20-ish hour maybe like action stealth game. Hopefully they'd like realize that there should be like stealth stuff in Assassin's Creed, another old perennial problem with this franchise. But assuming that they kind of like nail a lot of those elements, that to me is like an appealing idea. I could get behind like a modern reimagining of the classic style of Assassin's Creed. And this was the only one that they really showed anything of. So they didn't show gameplay footage, but they showed a cinematic trailer that is reminiscent of some of the trailers they showed back in the day for Assassin's Creed like 1 and 2. It's very purposely in that old style of Assassin's Creed trailer. Because Assassin's Creed is old enough of a franchise to start mining nostalgia from itself. And that kind of feels like what Mirage is doing, is trying to get those Assassin's Creed 1, 2 feelings bubbling up inside of people.
I'm literally on the official Ubisoft webpage for the game, and it has a couple of things like an immersive reactive city, the ultimate assassin, and then the third big box is a tribute to an original. Experience a modern take on the features and gameplay that have defined a franchise for 15 years. So definitely a selling point. And, you know, I would check this out if I have time when it comes out. Like, I like the idea of a smaller game. I often, this is one of the cases where it's an expansion that became its own game. Mm-hmm. And that often works out well. Some of my favorite games ever have been that, like Halo 3 ODST or Uncharted 5, The Lost Legacy, stuff like that. So, and I often hear that Assassin's Creed has really good DLC that I don't play because I don't finish the base game. I played Origins, I played Odyssey. I never got to the DLC. I've heard it had great DLC. So maybe this will be a good standalone thing that a newcomer could come to.
Yes, yeah. If this gets really good reviews, I would absolutely be interested in checking it out. Because I really like those old games. There's a reason I played a lot of them. But then after that, we have a thing that I will refuse to call by what it actually says, and will only call it Assassin's Creed Code Red. It is our cherry flavored Assassin's Creed. They say it's code name Red. Everyone knows that Assassin's Creed Code Red. Assassin's Creed Code Red is they're doing it. Assassin's Creed is old enough that they had their little thing in their office that said, in case of emergency, break glass for the Assassin's Creed franchise. And in that is, here's our Japan set Assassin's Creed game. And they broke that glass. It maybe what was inside of there might be kind of moldy by the time they actually make this game, because we are in a post Ghost of Tsushima world, which I feel like kind of has like taken the wind out of the sails of the potential Japan Assassin's Creed game. But that's what Code Red is. It will be set in what they say is feudal Japan. We'll talk about that in a second. But this is going to be in the style of the modern Assassin's Creeds. So this will be if you want your endless 100-hour plus giant action RPG open world crazy game. That's what this is going to be. It is made by the people that made Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the Greek one, because the Origins people made Valhalla. So this is what the Odyssey people have been making since then. Obviously, the game will have some sort of Japan-themed, I imagine, subtitle. They're not just going to call it. It's called Codename for a reason. But I would love it if they just released this game, feudal Japan set Assassin's Creed, and literally just called it Assassin's Creed Code Red. That would be
the Mountain Dew people are master marketers. Like, yes. I genuinely am in awe of the Mountain Dew people all the time, because every time I go into a gas station, there's a new flavor of Mountain Dew, and I feel compelled to try it out of curiosity, and they have funny, like, images on it. What a fucking tie-in it would be if they put out this game, and it was Mountain Dew Code Red, and you, for a couple of weeks there, you go into the gas station, and it's Assassin's Creed Code Red bottles, and you drink it, and on the bottle cap are, like, codes for in-game items. Like, come on. You're going to print money with that. Yeah, I do have to say, Odyssey is a great... I did not finish Odyssey, but what I played of it was fantastic, and I would have played more. I think I was like, that was during COVID, and I got... waylaid by something else, but I really enjoyed what I played of it. I thought it was a very solid improvement on Origins, and Odyssey was also by the team that did Black Flag, and that's my favorite one. So I like the idea of it. The problem is, in a world where we have Ghost of Tsushima, and we're getting Ghost of Tsushima 2, in a world where we've had Sekiro, and who knows, FromSoft might do more with that at some point, in a world where we have Nioh, and I haven't even played those games yet, in a world where we have more Japan games coming that you're going to talk about soon, when the world where we have a certain Yakuza game getting a remaster, it's like... I don't know. Even the very best Assassin's Creed game is going to be less interesting to me than every single one of those, and there's only so many hours in a day. I'm more interested in the Baghdad thing, because I haven't played a game set in Baghdad before. Like, that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah,
for me, like, there's like a monkey's paw element of this to me, as someone who both is, like, fascinated by historical Japan, and liked the Assassin's Creed games a lot back in the day. And my favorite thing about Assassin's Creed and it's the thing I've said many, many times on this podcast over the years, is that my favorite thing is the historical part of it. And it's something that I wish more video games did, is do these really cool historical settings. The thing with what they're saying for Code Red that bums me out is them saying feudal Japan. Now, they don't specify what that means to them. I am going to assume by feudal Japan they mean the Warring States period. That is what people generally mean. So I'm assuming that they're talking about, like, you know, the late 1500s, Oda Nobunaga, like that kind of thing, like the unification of Japan. I would guess that that's going to be like the ending of the game will be some sort of like Battle of Sekigahara style Tokugawa Ieyasu taking over, like that kind of stuff, which is the setting for like Neo and Neo 2. It's the setting of the Samurai Warriors games. It's the setting of like a lot of historical fiction in Japan, because it is, if you want to have a bunch of different big historical figures and these like wars and big battles and that kind of stuff, that's like, you know, the biggest war in the history internally of Japan. And because, I mean, it's effectively before Japan was like what we'd consider modern day Japan as a unified nation. That kind of came about from the ending of that period of time. And, you know, it's a very interesting historical period, but it's also so done, and it's so often done by Japanese studios. And it's the exact thing that, like, I forget who said it. It was one of the main, like, leads of Assassin's Creed, one of those old Assassin's Creed games way back in the day. Around the time I think 3 came out, they talked about the idea of doing a Japan-set Assassin's Creed, and they said they wouldn't do it because they felt like it was overdone. And with the implication being like, we don't want to do the samurai ninja thing, with the implication being that it would have been the Warring States period. And I was always annoyed by that answer, because it's like, that's not the only historical period that exists in Japan. You don't have to do the Warring States period. Nobody's telling you to do the Warring States period. I think there's just like assumption that that's when it would be set. And it has driven me crazy, because my ideal Japan set Assassin's Creed would be the Bakumatsu / the Meiji Restoration, which is your mid 1800s, like Japan has opened up, right? Commodore Perry has come with the black ships, and so like Japan has opened up trade with the rest of the world. It's the fall of the Tokugawa shogunate. It's a big civil war within Japan that leads to like the adoption of democracy within Japan, and like a huge period of social change. If you've seen like Rurouni Kenshin is set during the Meiji period. And that's like the ideal Assassin's Creed time, because
every Assassin's Creed game does that for its period, like the
Yes.
French Revolution for Unity or whatever, right?
Yeah, and it gives you this kind of like early modern technology stuff. You could have some of your like cool guns. You get this really interesting mix of like East and West stuff. You know, you get to have your stuff of, if it's set during the like early Meiji period, that's when you have like the sword laws or whatever being passed that meant that you could no longer carry swords around in public, which then gives you your assassin-y stuff that you get to do. Like, it is such the perfect period of time for Assassin's Creed game to be set. It is also thematically, Assassin's Creed has always been about the Templars, who are about like order and control, versus the assassins that are about freedom and chaos, and that matches pretty neatly along the like two sides of the civil war between the Tokugawa shogunate, the ruling power that was so controlling that they shut down almost all trade with outside nations, to the imperialist faction that wanted to like revolutionize Japan and radicalize it and open it up and bring in all these new technologies and these new ideas of like democracy and stuff like that, and restructure the whole country, even if you had to do it through violent means. It's like that cuts so cleanly along the Assassin's Creed ideological lines. I've been fantasizing about this fucking game for like 15 years, and now they're finally going to make an Assassin's Creed Japan game, and they're saying it's feudal Japan, and I'm like, fuck off. Luckily, other people are making Meiji era set games, so I don't have to worry about Assassin's Creed disappointing me. But there is like a 16-year-old Sean deep in my heart that was so disappointed when I saw this news, because it brought all these memories flooding back of me thinking about when I was way into Assassin's Creed 2 and 3 and stuff. Oh my god, a Meiji era set Assassin's Creed game would be so good. And then seeing them do this shit, it's like, come on, get more creative, pick a different period. You could do better than this. The old Assassin's Creeds would have done better than this.
Yeah. Here, Sean, I have a pitch for an Assassin's Creed game.
Okay.
This is Assassin's Creed Occupation. This is during the U.S. occupation of Japan post-World War II. You play as a group of Japanese assassins who want to drive out the Americans and restore the empire. And so you have to go after General Douglas MacArthur. You have to do all the stuff. You're supporting the unions that are trying to do big strikes that get put down by the military. It's going to be very controversial. It's going to be an absolute firebomb. It's going to piss off people in Japan, America, everywhere else. I think this is the game to make. Just destroy the entire company Ubisoft on the altar of this game.
Yes, they should just do. Yes, they should pick the most controversial modern day historical periods you can. Implicate modern day the people who are still alive in your Assassin's Creed stories. Yeah, let's just go dive all the way into it.
Yes, indeed. All right. Is this one of the games that's going to be in Infinity?
I believe so. I think this will be... I think Infinity, I want to say, is going to launch with this or around the time this comes out, because Mirage will come out before Infinity. So I think that's the plan. There are two other games they announced. One is called Assassin's Creed Codename Hex, which I think is the one that's meant to come out after Red, and they just said, hey, we're making it. It's being made by Ubisoft Montreal. Quebec is the one that is making Codename Red. I think Montreal is the one that put out Valhalla in Origins. So they just basically said, yeah, we're going to make more of them after that. So, and here you can get the code name of it. I have no idea why they announced this.
Because we don't know what period it is or anything?
No. They just said, we're making more of them. It's just okay, yeah, I assumed you would be. But thanks for letting us know. Because again, the only thing they showed anything of was just Mirage. Everything else is them just talking about shit. And then they announced a mobile game called Assassin's Creed Codename Jade. This will be, I'm just going to read Game Informer's quote here. Ubisoft's first open-world mobile Assassin's Creed game featuring all the, quote, iconic Assassin's Creed gameplay but optimized for an experience with touch controls. Set in ancient China, players will be able to create and customize their own assassins for the first time in the franchise. You will be able to sneak through bustling cities, engage in intense combat, discover the secrets and vastness of ancient China, and climb atop the Great Wall of China in Codename Jade, which is, quote, coming soon to mobile devices, according to Ubisoft. That's what that is.
Okay, why did they do this event? This is weird.
I don't know. But we know they will make a game set in, quote, ancient China, which is not helpful. That doesn't narrow it down at all. It will be sometime in Chinese history after the Great Wall of China, but it's still ancient, which is a long period of time.
This is the thing you didn't say, Sean, about the feudal Japan thing, and it's even more true about China, is that these are countries that deal with historical timescales that you just don't have in the West. So when you say ancient China, there's no European country that has something that long that you can talk about. So if you say feudal England, I have a general sense of what that is. If you say ancient China, you're literally dealing with millennia. It's what a ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah, and feudal Japan is a little bit grating because it's feudal is a specific political system that Japan had a similar kind of system to, but it's not literally feudalism because, of course, Japan came up with it on its own. It is not medieval Europe. So I've never really loved the term feudal Japan. Then the last thing they talked about was Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the last chapter, which is to me a lot like the last Naruto the movie. I'm sure this is going to be their DLC for Assassin's Creed Valhalla with one last quest arc called The Last Chapter. Ubisoft says it ties up some of the remaining storylines established throughout the game's narrative, and it will reunite Eivor with key characters, including some with historical significance. Ubisoft did not reveal when The Last Chapter would be coming to Valhalla. They just said it would be. Sometime.
Yay?
Yep. This is one of the most peculiar events I have ever seen a major game publisher do, where all they did was just talk ad nauseum about this one franchise. We're talking about only two of these things have, I guess if you include The Last Chapter, 3 of these things, so only half of these things have real titles. The rest of them are referred to just by code names. Codename Red, Hex, and Jade. Why? Why not just do here's our real trailer for Mirage, here's a teaser trailer for Code Red, we'll show actual footage of whatever the fuck Infinity is, and then we'll tease, we'll give a logo treatment for Assassin's Creed Jade or whatever, which that's the only one of those where I could see that being the literal title of that game if they wanted to.
Yeah, It's weird. Now I want Mountain Dew Code Red. I'm actually drinking regular Mountain Dew at the moment, but Code Red is always refreshing. I want that more than I want that game.
Yes. Yeah. But that's Ubisoft. That's what they did.
All right, we spent a lot of time on that, and it kind of feels like we were really just breaking down like a kind of, frankly, subpar Jason Schreier piece of reporting, where you're like, man, he didn't get as many details as he usually does.
Yeah.
So
I feel that was very therapeutic to me. I feel like I had a lot of pent-up feelings about Assassin's Creed I was able to get out, so I'm glad that we talked about it.
This has been literally, for the lifetime of the Weekly Stuff podcast, and even its like baby predecessor podcasts, a thing, Sean, you just periodically need to, this is therapy for you, and Assassin's Creed is your abusive father, not your actual father is not, I mean like in a metaphorical sense, and you just need to talk about it.
I mean, I feel like that's all Assassin's Creed fans have, that exact relationship with Assassin's Creed. It's just that kind of franchise.
Someone on Twitter the other day, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting who said it, told me it's like a normal Western, AAA open world series that has an American version of Kingdom Our Hearts grafted onto the side, and that is our relationship to it. And I'm like, it all makes sense now. That is exactly what Assassin's Creed is.
That is a very good way of describing it, yes.
Yeah. All right. You want to talk about Nintendo?
Yeah, what the fuck did Nintendo do, Jonathan?
So Nintendo had a big direct. It was actually a pretty long one. They said it was going to be 40 minutes. It was closer to 50 minutes. Mm-hmm. It was pretty packed. Like, it moved very fast. I don't know if it, like, I think it was too long. They had a lot of their, like, headlines, and I don't know if there was anything really big enough past the first 5 minutes to, like, warrant the length of the thing. But there was a lot of good stuff here. So the biggest thing, I think, easily was actually at the very beginning, because they announced the next Fire Emblem game. Not a spin-off, not a Warriors game, just the next mainline entry in the series, coming, I think, sooner than you would have expected after Three Houses. Mm-hmm. And this is Fire Emblem Engage. It's anime as fuck. As anime as fuck as Fire Emblem has become, this is really anime as fuck in its visuals. You have a protagonist who has been asleep for thousands of years. He's a divine dragon from a royal family. He wakes up, and Marth from the original Fire Emblem is like a ghost in his sword. He has a ring from Marth and then fights with the ghost, and you have other heroes that you get from across the Assassin's Creed world, I guess. It kind of looks like taking some of the ideas from the mobile game Assassin's Creed Heroes.
You mean Fire Emblem Heroes. You just called it Assassin's Creed like 3 times.
Did I?
Yes.
Fuck! I have the brain worms from the Assassin's Creed. God, no.
Assassin's Creed got into your brain just like it did mine.
I know. Fire Emblem is what I'm talking about. Fire Emblem Heroes, the mobile game, yes. Pulling in some of that. It does look like it has the hub world from Three Houses. Otherwise, it does seem fairly like simpler in a way that I have wanted Fire Emblem. Like, there was no indication of there being like 7 branching stories, and you have to play 300 hours to get the true ending or something. It's coming pretty soon. The combat and tactics they showed off looked very nice. It looks like a new Fire Emblem game. I love Fire Emblem games. This is coming January 20th. There's a standard edition and a big divine edition with a poster, steelbook, and art book. That has not gone up for pre-order in the US yet. I just pre-ordered it from Amazon Japan because it was up there, and the yen is so weak against the dollar right now. With shipping, it's cheaper than if I bought this in the US. Mm-hmm. So there you go. And if the Nintendo now, their cartridges are the same globally, and they just have the different languages on them. So, anywho, new Fire Emblem. I am excited for that. Three Houses was not quite my jam in the way it was some people's. Still a good game, and I'm always excited for a new one. Especially, I hope this is maybe a little stripped down from what Three Houses did, just the largesse of it.
Yeah, there was something about the trailer that did make it look like it was like this game started its life as a mobile game, and then it eventually got evolved into a Switch game. Like the title, Fire Emblem Engage, that sounds like a mobile game to me. The weird mechanic of here's the classic Fire Emblem heroes that become like your stand from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and do a cool move for you. Like that's kind of weird. And I do have to say, I really hate the way the main character looks. I think the main character looks fucking terrible. His awful red and blue hairstyle looks so unbelievably ugly. It is one of the worst character designs I have seen in years. And when I watched the trailer, I just could not look at him. Am I crazy, or is that not like an awful fucking character design?
I don't know. I don't know if it's awful or if it's so bad it shoots the moon and goes back around to rad. I'm looking at the main box art for the game, which I actually like a lot. It's extraordinarily colorful, and we only saw like the male protagonist in the trailer. It looks like there's a female protagonist too, and I think the hair color maybe looks better on her because there's something about long flowing locks that you can do more with there. But yeah, it's not just like anime as fuck, but it's a very particular, like, this looks like the kind of game someone would be playing in an isekai show.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's weird.
It looks like if, like, at the beginning of some sort of isekai show, like, this is like what Sword Art Online does, where the main character has, like, their avatar that is, like, the most garish, like, generic JRPG boy in this very ugly way, and then something happens and they just, like, become their normal-looking self. Like, it looks like it's a temp design for the first 10 minutes of a show before it's replaced by this is actually what the main character looks like. That's what this weird motherfucker looks like. I like red and blue, like in bright red and blue, harshly juxtaposed next to each other, looks so garish and ugly to me. I cannot understand why they went with this character design.
You know, one thing I will say is we don't know if this is a customizable character at all. Three Houses was you only chose male or female for Byleth, but all the other 3D Fire Emblems in recent times, there's been a default, and then you can customize the hair color and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if you have to play looking like that. We'll see. But yes, it is. It's a choice. Let's say that it's a choice. You know,
yeah. All you would have to do is go into a character creator and like uncheck whatever option there is for like multiple hair colors. You know, that's like, oh, do you want to like have this part of the hair look like this, and this is like, just uncheck that, and it just becomes uniformly blue or red, and it would look fine. It's both of them together in this very ugly way that is what is setting off my nerves when I look at this fucking guy. I'm going to close this window. I can't look at him anymore.
We had our first batch of headlines. Let's go through these fast. It Takes Two is coming to Switch in November. I didn't know that wasn't on Switch already.
Yeah.
Fatal Frame, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse is coming for the first time in the West, early 2023. Wave 2 of the expansion pass for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is coming in October. SpongeBob SquarePants, The Cosmic Shake is coming next year. This one was fascinating to me. There is a fitness boxing Fist of the North Star game coming in March. Has that existed before? Is this brand new? What is this?
So there is this franchise. I don't know if any of these games have ever come out over here, but I know that there is like a series of games that are these like fitness games on the Wii on the Switch. Actually, I think it might have started on the Wii now that I think about it. That are like boxing games or whatever. And yeah, there is a Hokuto no Ken or Fist of the North Star version of one of those. The best part about it, and this is a tragedy that they did not try to find a way to localize this, is the subtitle of this game in Japan is Omae wa mou yasete-iru, which is Japanese for like you are already slim, which is a parody on Kenshiro's thing of where he says you are already dead, or Omae wa mou shindeiru after he does his crazy Fist of the North Star thing. It is maybe the funniest subtitle I've ever seen for a game, and it only exists in the Japanese version of the game. But so this would be one that if you were interested, I would import it just so you could own that joke. It's so good.
I'm reading now. Apparently, fitness boxing it's a trilogy of games now on the Switch. Okay. It started on the Wii as the shape boxing games, which in the US were called Gold's Gym, but in the rest of the world were shape boxing. And then there is Fitness Boxing 1, Fitness Boxing 2, Rhythm and Exercise, and now there is Fitness Boxing Fist of the North Star. And it is absolutely hilarious because the Gold's Gym / shape boxing games just on the covers have like real human beings boxing. Uh-huh. Then in the fitness boxing, it's like sort of like the people from We Fit, like these kind of like pale avatars that have like no features. And then it's Fist of the North Star. Okay. Fine.
It's like the weirdest IP crossover ever. I have no idea why they did it, but that is because so I did watch the Nintendo Direct. I just had it kind of on in the background while I was grinding stuff out in Genshin Impact. And every once in a while I would look over, and as soon as this started, I looked, I was like, what the fuck am I looking at? And I had to go look up a bunch of stuff about the game. Like, and that's where I learned about its Japanese subtitle. Because it is... I couldn't believe that the internet didn't go more crazy for this, because I do think it is a hilarious thing that they're making.
Indeed. Well, maybe we need to do Fist of the North Star on Japanimation Station so we can do an episode on fitness boxing Fist of the North Star.
Yeah, I'm down for it.
All right. Ubisoft has a party game called Oddballers. Tunic, which I reviewed on here a couple months ago, is coming to Switch in September. That's another game I thought was already on Switch. Those Front Mission remakes are coming. The first one in November, the second in 2023, and they've added a remake of Front Mission 3. I know there's some people excited for these. Story of Seasons, A Wonderful Life, which is the remake of Harvest Moon, A Wonderful Life. Long, convoluted history here where Harvest Moon became Story of Seasons because it was actually originally Story of Seasons, blah, blah, blah. If you liked that game on GameCube, it's getting a full remake now. It's just called Story of Seasons. It's coming next summer. Then we got a Splatoon 3 update, which was basically just telling us about the first Splatfest, which is September 23rd, so this coming weekend. And they've actually, it's very fun how they do this. If you go into Splatoon 3 right now in the lobby, they're constructing all the stuff for the Splatfest, so it's like it's under construction, but you like have to run around it and like to get to the game. And so that is coming. It is 3 teams this time. What would you bring to a deserted island? Gear, grub, or fun? I'm not sure what fun means in this sense. Gear and grub I get. I don't know what it means to bring fun. I feel like you could bring grub, and grub is fun. But there you go.
Anyone who doesn't answer gear is a fool and will die a quick death on that island.
Thomas and I are doing grub. Grub all the way.
Your grub's going to go bad. You can't bring enough grub to survive indefinitely. If you get gear, you can create a sustainable life for yourself on that island. You're all fools. Anyone who picked fun, like, they might as well fucking drown yourself as soon as you get there, you fucking morons.
I want to make one of those Splatoon, like, little art cards you make in the game that's just Sean's monologue just now, write it all out, and then it's just above my profile pic when people are walking around in Splatoon. Yes. Anyway, then I think we got my favorite announcement of this show, which is Octopath Traveler 2, surprise announcement. It's a straight full sequel to Octopath Traveler with, well, not straight in terms of narrative. It's 8 new travelers, but it's the same conceit. It's 8 travelers. They showed them all off, introduced the new characters. If you didn't play Octopath Traveler, the whole conceit of that game is that there were 8 characters and 8 sort of intersecting campaigns, and they were all separate stories. There was kind of a vague connection between them, but it really was sort of like a book of short stories in a JRPG. I really loved it. There is a mobile game right now called Champions of the Continent that I have not had time to check out, but I know is actually very acclaimed by those who are playing it. But this is a full console sequel. It's coming to Switch. It's also coming to PS5 and Xbox Series X and all the other consoles. Day and date, this is not a Switch exclusive, but it was announced at the Switch thing. One cool upgrade they've made here is that in the original game, every traveler had different specific actions in combat and in the world, and now that differs. There's a night and day system, and so those abilities change. I also think it looks like the engine has gotten quite a big upgrade, because I've played all of their HD 2D games, and this, like, it looks like there's a whole other kind of layer of depth to it, and lighting and that kind of stuff. It looks really gorgeous. That's coming out February 24th. I'm very excited for that.
Yes. Disappointing name, though. I made a tweet talking about it. It should be called Project Octopath Traveler and have 9 travelers in it. That's how you should upgrade it. Or, I mean, at the very least, it should have been announced. I think we can all agree they should have called it Project Octopath Traveler 2, just to keep with tradition, if nothing else. Even if you're just going to slap a 2 on that title. Come on, you got to announce it as Project, and then just take the project off at some point. And just say, yeah, no, we're kidding. This is just the name of the game.
Yes. Weird thing, but there you go. We then had more headlines, and this is where we started to learn that this truly was, if you are into farming sim games, this was the Nintendo Direct for you, because in this section we started with Fae Farm, coming spring 2023. I don't remember anything about that other than what I wrote in my notes. There is a new Theat Rhythm Final Fantasy game, which is the Final Fantasy rhythm game. It's called Theat Rhythm Final Bar Line. It's for the 35th anniversary of Final Fantasy. It has almost 400 songs categorized by game. It has 2-player local co-op, and it's coming out in February, and it will have paid DLC from the Saga franchise, the Nier games, Octopath Traveler, Live Alive, and more. So I have played these a little bit in the past. I think it's a fairly boring take on the rhythm game, so it's not really my thing. If it's your thing, it looks like there's a lot of songs there.
Yeah, this is like, theater rhythm stuff is the thing that has just been going on for a very long time, and I've never really understood, is this like a re-release of the last game? Or are they making sequels? I've never really understood what this franchise is outside of, it's like a Final Fantasy rhythm thing.
Yeah. They reminded us about Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, which is coming out in October. Looks fantastic. I'm very excited for it. They showed off the Gold Edition with the Season Pass, because it'll have big DLC like the original game did. They showed Rune Factory 3 Special coming next year, plus a new Rune Factory series will launch in the future. So there you go, more... I guess, is Rune Factory farming stuff? No, it's just RPG.
No, it's just like a JRPG thing. And I do think, because you said the new Rune Factory series, and that is what they said. I remember noting that. It's like, that's a really weird... It's not a new Rune Factory game. It's a new Rune Factory series, and that is a weird way to phrase that. I don't know if that's meaningful or not.
Yeah. Then they showed off... So they have now the N64 app in the Nintendo Switch Online family. And they showed off a bunch of, well, new for the N64 app. They're obviously old N64 games, but a really actually big list of games coming to it. This is the biggest list I can remember for any of these apps being announced at one time. They showed off Pilot Wing 64, Mario Party 1, 2, and 3. That's pretty cool. Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2, 1080-degree skateboarding, Excite Bike 64... Oh, snowboarding. Sorry, I wrote that down. 1080 skateboarding wouldn't be as exciting, probably. No. Yeah, snowboarding. Excite Bike 64. And then they had and one other thing. GoldenEye 64. And I screamed holy shit at my TV. Not necessarily because I love GoldenEye 64. It's good. But I just did not expect this to come out on a modern console, let alone on the Nintendo Switch app. But there you go. And it'll have online multiplayer, all that good stuff. It will also be coming to Xbox, but without online multiplayer, which is weird.
Well, so here's what this is, because this is something that had been leaked forever ago. Is that, like, because I think the thing that people assumed that GoldenEye for the longest time would just not be able to come out again in any form because of the insane distribution of the rights between Nintendo, Microsoft, through them owning Rare, and then obviously the James Bond license. But however they kind of worked it out has allowed Nintendo to do their emulation of the game, right? So they're releasing it as emulation in their N64 thing for the Switch. What Microsoft with the Xbox is getting is effectively a remake of that game. So if you're getting the Xbox version, you are getting a modern remake of it. I mean, it's not like a remake in the sense that they're going to change the game, but just it's not going to be the N64 game again. And so I suspect that is one of the reasons why it is not online multiplayer, is that the Switch emulator, right, all of their multiplayer stuff and the way that the Switch emulates allows you to do the local multiplayer modes tunneled through online, whereas Microsoft would have to build an online multiplayer mode for that game, and I imagine they're like, we don't need to do that. We'll just sell you this remake of GoldenEye and hope that people are satisfied with local and the campaign.
But honestly, I think Nintendo kind of wins here, because I can imagine a lot of people, if you have that nostalgia, having a lot of fun getting friends together online and playing GoldenEye online, just the original code.
Or they play GoldenEye online, they're like, man, this game maybe doesn't hold up so great, which would be my reaction.
Well, that is, I know that's your reaction, and it's frankly my reaction probably too, but I do think there's people who still swear by this game, and they're out there. But that's a good group of games coming. I have the Nintendo 64 app now. My Switch Online ran out this month, and I did upgrade to the expansion pack because there's just enough stuff I wanted to check out. And it's a really solid group of games they've got in that app so far. I like the way the app is structured, the same way as I like the Super NES and NES ones. You can also go in and just download the Japanese version of the app like you could with the other ones. And boy, Japanese N64 box art is so much better. Mm-hmm. It's very fun to look at. But yeah, it's mostly it's a good little library of N64 games. It actually, booting it up and seeing the menu of games to pick reminds me of being in a hotel as a kid, where if you're not American, you probably can't relate to this, but in American hotels when we were growing up, there would be an N64 controller with the TV in the hotel, and you could order N64 games to play by the hour in your hotel room. And I remember playing bits and pieces of games like that. And it's just they're all there. Ocarina of Time, Mario 64, Paper Mario are all on there now. So it's a good group of games. And I think what I like about this group they announced is that there's a lot of really good multiplayer stuff that will really benefit from the online. My brother and I, up until we moved out of our parents' house, would still sometimes plug in the N64 and play Mario Party 2. And the ability to just now do that online, and it's just the original Mario Party 2, that fucking slaps. That's awesome. Yeah. That's really cool. And I'm excited about that.
Yes, or you can play the mini games in Pokemon Stadium.
Yes. I remember Pokemon Stadium 2 having a little more to do because Pokemon Stadium 1 was pretty boring.
Yes.
But I'm glad they're just doing both. So it's neat. So you've got that. You've got this Square Enix game called Various Daylife coming out, which I couldn't figure out what it was. Apparently that's a mobile game that came out years ago that's just now coming to consoles. You have Factorio coming to Switch. You have a game called IB. I don't know what that is. I didn't write anything else. There's Mario Strikers Battle League is getting its second free update, and Pauline and Diddy Kong are coming in to play soccer. You have Atelier Ryza 3, and then you have Wave 3 of the Mario Kart DLC on the way. They showed off 2 courses, one from Mario Kart 2 where I didn't care about, but the other was Peach Gardens from the DS game, which is one of the best, so I'm excited for that. Nintendo Switch Sports, they reminded us about the free update adding golf, but they did point out it's been delayed a little bit. It's coming holiday 2022. But it is a full remaster of all the golf content from the Wii Sports series, from Wii Sports and its sequels. It's all 21 holes from those different games. So that's kind of neat. And then Miyamoto came out, Shigeru Miyamoto.
Yeah.
In a very weird stretch where he talked about the Illumination movie, the Mario movie for a little bit, he talked about Super Nintendo World, and then he wanted to talk about Pikmin. And he spent a not insignificant amount of time filibustering about Pikmin Bloom, the Niantic game that came out last year, including showing off his Pikmin shirt. And that was kind of weird. And then finally we got the main event, which was a release, an announcement of Pikmin 4. No other details or gameplay. That's coming 2023. If you consider Pikmin a farming sim, which it is in a tiny little bit, kind of, again, just lots of farming games this year.
Yes. It should be emphasized that when he talked about Pikmin Bloom for the majority of that section, he didn't talk about anything new being added to that game. He was just re-explaining to people what that game was that has been out for a year. And it felt weirdly desperate to me for like Nintendo's POV of like, you already put the game out. Like, if you want to talk about it again, you gotta like, here's our big seasonal update or whatever. But you can't just go out and like re-announce this video game that's already on the market that nobody cares about.
I think, I don't know what it is. Maybe Miyamoto just has a writer in his contract that he gets a certain amount of time to talk about and make Pikmin games, because that is his passion. And I don't know if it's anyone else's, but it is definitely his.
Yeah, I mean, more power to Miyamoto. I'm happy that he seems happy making his Pikmin stuff, but because I liked Pikmin 1. That was the only one I played back in the GameCube days. I'm happy for them to make a Pikmin 4, but the Pikmin Bloom thing was very weird on that video.
Yeah. All right, they showed off Just Dance 2023. They showed off another Square Enix game and another farming RPG, Harvestella, which had the tagline this time that I found weirdly aggressive: "Can you survive the season of death?" And it had this was in the headlines part, so the headlines are always introduced with like a kind of witty tagline, and then the do 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 sound is like they go into the preview, and so it was like, "Can you survive the season of death?" And then going into like do 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 and into Harvestella. That was weird.
Yeah. I will say that as someone who, again, I didn't watch it actively, but I had it on the background. When they get to some of these segments where they're just like ripping through games, I kind of wish they would, like, you don't do one of those intros for every single game, because for some of them it was like, your little intro and outro thing is as long as you showed that game for. That video could have been like cut down by like a third if they just like made some of that stuff a bit more efficient. Some of it I think is like good, and I like Nintendo's style. But there's something about that was like, okay, let's just move on. Like, yeah, okay, I get it. Like, you don't have to do this for literally every single game you're talking about.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this one was just heavier on it than most Nintendo Directs. Let's see, they reminded us about Bayonetta 3. I'm excited. Bayonetta 3 is great. This spot was funny to me because it started with the phrase, "after 500 years." And I thought they were going to say, the game is finally coming out.
Yes.
But it's, no, after 500 years, Bayonetta awoke from her slumber or whatever, which is the plot of Bayonetta 1. But yes, after 500 long years, Bayonetta 3 is coming out October 28th. I'm very excited for it. Then they showed a game called Master Detective Archives Rain Code, which is a new game from the creators of Danganronpa, which is launching on Switch in spring 2023. They said first on Switch, so it's presumably coming elsewhere. But yes, the game is called Master Detective Archives Rain Code. So there you go.
Very slick. Very efficient titling there.
Yeah. I mean, Danganronpa doesn't that have a much longer title? It's like Trigger Happy Havoc. It's like 5
They,
different
yeah, I
titles.
mean, yeah, they all have subtitles. Like Danganronpa
Right.
is like the series name or whatever.
Yes. Okay, then they showed off cloud editions of Resident Evil 2, 3, 7, and Village. And every time they do these cloud editions, there is then a bunch of controversy because they're terrible, because there's no such thing as good game streaming yet, let alone on the Switch. And I'm waiting for the class action lawsuit that shuts this shit down permanently, because I kind of like the cloud editions are something that started and are done more actively in Japan. And if you understand how like Japanese like public Wi-Fi works, like that makes a little more sense. In the US, these things are baffling. Do not spend because these are always like full $60 to get a shitty cloud version of a good game. Just don't do this. It's bad. Don't do this.
Yeah, it does almost feel like they just shouldn't release them in the West. Like, if it works well in Japan with that infrastructure, that's great. But yes, it always just like strikes me weird. As like game streaming over here has very much become a like something you can do on the side with like Xbox and PlayStation and stuff. It's like, oh yeah, you can stream your game to your PC or whatever. After the kind of like crash and burning of Stadia, it feels like the focused this is the way you access this game is just through streaming, and that's it. There is no local version of it. It feels dead, at least over here. So it's always weird when they pop up for Nintendo stuff.
And it should be dead. It's not something that consumers should be asked to pay for. You're not actually getting anything. I do think at some point maybe there should be some kind of like class action to shut this kind of thing down, because I think it's predatory. All right. Then more headlines. Sifu, which you reviewed on the podcast, Sean, that's coming to Switch on November 8th.
That would be one I would wait for reviews for if the frame rate is good. That is a game that if that does not run well on Switch, I don't know if it will or not, but if that does not run well, do not buy that game on Switch. Wait for reviews to see if that runs well. If it does run well, it is a run-based game. You know, it's kind of a roguelike thing, so it would be a good platform for it, but only if it runs at a smooth 60 frames per second. It will be the thing I will tell everyone if they're interested in Sifu on the Switch.
All right. Then here's one I know I'm excited for. I think you're excited for. Final Fantasy Crisis Core Reunion.
Yes.
Or technically it's Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. That is the remaster. That is coming to all the platforms December 13th. I don't know if we had a date for that yet, but we do have a date, December 13th. That's a good spot for that game because everything will be out and we are in the dull month for game releases, and I'm really excited to play this. So there you go.
Yep. It looks good.
Yep. Radiant Silvergun, classic arcade shoot-'em-up, coming to Switch at some point. Endless Dungeon from Sega is a roguelike game. Tales of Symphonia Remastered is coming early 2023. Life is Strange, the Arcadia Bay Collection is coming September 27th. Romancing Saga Minstrel Song Remastered is coming at some point. Lego Brick Tales is coming this fall. Disney Speedstorm, which is a terrifying nightmare Disney racing game, is coming. Fall Guys Season 2 is coming this week. And then their last two big things were Kirby getting another game. Kirby's getting games all the time.
Yeah.
This is Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe. I had to look up what this is. This was a Wii game from 2011. So it's that last year of the Wii when no one was paying attention to the Wii anymore. And this was a Kirby game that came out then. Had decent reviews. I don't know. I haven't looked into it more. Maybe there's a whole fan base behind this game. But it is getting a Switch port remaster February 24th, 2023 as part of celebrations for Kirby's 30th anniversary. So, yeah, I have not quite caught up on the last Kirby game that came out, the Kirby and the
3D
Forbidden
one?
Land or whatever. Yeah, which I do own. I just haven't played it yet. I need to play that one. So, now we've got this remaster coming, and then finally we got the formal announcement of the title of Breath of the Wild 2. It is The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. It started with Link in the sky. He jumps off. He's climbing. He's flying. He's got a cool new rock glider thing. They dated it. It's coming May 12th, 2023. And one funny wrinkle in this whole thing is that they did not air the Nintendo Direct live in the UK. Obviously, you could watch it in the UK. Just go to the US YouTube channel. But the UK Nintendo channel did not air this. And at the end, I think everyone was assuming, oh, the Queen just died. This game is called Tears of the Kingdom. They wanted to avoid that. I feel like no one actually would have pointed that out. If it aired live, it's because they held it back that then people pointed it out. But there you go. Tears of the Kingdom. The UK knows it well, having lost their beloved queen. There you go.
Yes. Nintendo just wanted to give everyone on Twitter a free joke. That's it. They're just like, hey, Twitter, here's the joke for you. Tears of the Kingdom. Queen Elizabeth II just died. Here's you can get out there, tweet your joke, everybody. Everyone is original. These are all very different original jokes. So like it was a pretty brief little kind of teaser trailer thing. There's something very hilarious to me. If you think back to the last time they showed that game, like a year or so ago, there were all these articles that were talking about like the title of the game was not going to be called Breath of the Wild 2. That was a temporary title, and that Nintendo, like a Nintendo person was quoted as saying they're not going to reveal the title yet because it could spoil some elements of the game. And we made fun of it on the podcast at the time, and I just want to like bring it back up to just demonstrate for everybody what spoilers. Like, the thing we made fun is, like, what could you possibly spoil about the game in the title? That's, like, not how titles work. And lo and behold, the title of the game is Tears of the Kingdom. Why is that a thing that can now be revealed to us all, now 1 year later, but it could not be told to us 1 year ago? I just want to remind everyone of one of the stupidest things I've ever seen as an official comment from the producer side of a video game, with that they could not announce the title because it would spoil the content of the game. And now we know that the kingdom will in fact be sad in the next Zelda game. Spoiler.
Yeah. What we saw of it looks good. I'm sure we will get much more information in the months to come. They're planning that for May. It's been in the works long enough that, and Nintendo doesn't usually slip dates. I presume it will actually come out then. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there you go. Looks good. It'll probably be a Game of the Year contender. I'm excited for it.
Yes, but it will make our kingdom cry.
Yep. All right, that's the Nintendo news. I've done a lot of talking. Sean, what is next? That same day as the Nintendo Direct, we did have a Sony State of Play, which is their PlayStation version of Nintendo Direct that never gets the same amount of press. Although I think this one maybe was more substantive than the equivalent Nintendo Direct.
For stuff that I was interested in, definitely. It was nice. It was like, as someone who, again, kind of watched both of them, I do appreciate that Sony is much more efficient about this shit. They're like, yeah, let's just get through it. And you did not add between every single one, because there was something about in that last section of the Nintendo Direct where you were just running through titles. People should remember a lot of those had little bumpers at the beginning and end that slows this stuff down. But yeah, certainly not as many games at the State of Play as the Nintendo Direct, but there were some really cool announcements. So Sony opened it up with the announcement of Tekken 8. I believe that Tekken 8 had not been announced yet. I think it was teased. A Tekken announcement was teased at the last EVO a few weeks ago, but they didn't say what it was going to be, and they showed a really good trailer for Tekken 8. It is a next-gen only game, and it looks very, very nice. You see Jin, and I think Kazuya is the other character, the Tekken dude, fighting in a blasted volcano-esque landscape, because Tekken likes their volcanoes. And it's just, you see two very nice looking, very sweaty, muscled up dudes beating the shit out of each other in a very Tekken-like fashion. I have not played a Tekken game in a long time, but there's something about how shiny that game looked in a kind of next-gen-y way that has me actually interested in it. I liked Tekken, I think 3 was the one I used to play at a friend's house who had a PlayStation. But I know that Tekken 7 is a really beloved game. Tekken 7 is the best-selling Tekken game. But that game, I think, came out in arcades in 2014, so it's pretty old in the tooth. So it's pretty cool to get a big new Tekken game announced. That's how they opened up their show.
Yeah, and I just want to say I'm looking at the Tekken 8 footage right now, and the sheer number of effects on screen during the fight, rain and particles and fire and all sorts of electricity coming off their bodies, all at a smooth 60 FPS. That looks properly next gen. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, and credit to them for announcing the game with showing a trailer that has obviously gameplay in it. It has an extra cinematic camera effect in certain areas, but it is very clearly this is someone playing Tekken. You can see the animations, you can see the Tekken juggles. It is not a purely cinematic trailer at all. So that was a nice thing to see. Is you're very obviously looking at the game. So very good trailer. Then we got an announcement that I am extremely excited for, which is a global release of a remake of Ryuga Gotoku Ishin, or Yakuza Ishin, as we might have once called it, but now we know it is called Like a Dragon Ishin. This is kind of a hint of things to come in terms of the title for that the studio is doing. But this was the Yakuza game, or Like a Dragon game, released in Japan at the launch of the PS4 in Japan. That is a historical drama version of Yakuza. There are a couple of these games. There's one on the PS2 called Kinzan, where it's like you can almost think of it as like the cast of the Yakuza franchise, like playing historical characters in this kind of historical setting. So it is Kiryu, or someone who looks identical to Kiryu and seems to have the same kind of personality and certainly the same voice actor, but it is playing Sakamoto Ryoma, who is a historical figure in Japan's Meiji period. So this game is set in the mid-1800s during the Bakumatsu, the fall of the Tokugawa shogunate. And I know this game is very beloved in Japan. It's one of a lot of people's favorite games in the franchise, but had never come out over here, partially because of its setting being this kind of historical Japan thing. I think it is both a harder game to localize and then also one that is not as immediately accessible to the broader Western audiences, presumably the thinking for why it never came out over here. But now Yakuza / Like a Dragon is a big global franchise, so this game is getting a full remake, is being remade in the Unreal Engine instead of the Dragon Engine, which is interesting. It seems like they might be moving away from the Dragon Engine as a studio, because that engine is quite old at this point. That goes back to Yakuza 6 now. So they're kind of updating and moving to a different platform. But it looks very nice. I own the Japanese version of this game, but I have not played it. I bought it forever ago, meaning to play it in Japanese. But now I don't have to try to play a game that will have that much kanji, because it has a lot of kanji in it. And instead I can just play the English localization version, which looks really good.
It fucking looks great.
Yeah.
I am looking at the footage right now, and it is Kiryu fighting with a fucking sword.
Yep.
He slashes a dude, pulls out a gun, shoots him in the head, and then he's fighting with two guns going around. He's cutting bullets in half with his sword. This game looks fucking incredible. Like you, Sean, I've played some of the Yakuza stuff. I've obviously not played nearly as much as you, but just having some awareness of it, I've always been aware of Ishin, and I've always thought that sounds amazing. We should get that. I'm so glad we're getting it. This remake, this is going to be one of the highlights of whatever year it winds up coming out, probably next year. And yeah, do you want to talk about them renaming the series over here? Because I think it's really interesting.
Yes, so there's some other Like a Dragon stuff that they did the next day that we'll talk about, some other game announcements there. But yes, so consistently now in the West they are changing the name of the franchise to Like a Dragon. So to give people the full context of that, the name of this franchise has always been in Japan Ryuga Gotoku, which means like a dragon. Like a dragon is a very literal translation of that phrase. It has never been called Yakuza in Japan, which makes sense because the Kiryu is almost never a Yakuza. The amount of time you play the game where he is actually directly affiliated as a member of a Yakuza family in Japan in this franchise is maybe an hour total across all of the games. He is generally not actually a member of the Yakuza. He is a former member of the Yakuza. So it kind of has always been a funny title for the franchise in the West because it's never been entirely appropriate. Obviously, the games are heavily concerned with the Yakuza and Yakuza heavily feature, but you're not actually playing as a Yakuza member for most of these games.
And I also think I will say, having played Yakuza 7 or Yakuza Like a Dragon,
yes, now
Like a Dragon 1, I'm not sure how we'll title those going forward, and some of the other, bits and pieces, and I've seen you play them, they're not Yakuza games. I don't know how to say that other than, if you know Yakuza movies, that's not what these are. These are so much more weird and idiosyncratic and, frankly, kind of humanist and, sweet and that kind of thing. These are not battles without honor and humanity.
Yeah.
That's just not what these are.
Yeah, they're more like big J-dramas that feature lots of Yakuza characters. But, the Yakuza are as heavily featured in, the Judgment games as they are in the Yakuza games.
Right.
So it's just, it's part of the setting more than it is, what the games are about. So it has always been, a slightly off title in the West, though it is a very, eye-catching title. So it makes sense, yeah, that they're changing it. And then as you point out, Jonathan, like this kind of like soft happened with Yakuza 7, which over here was called Yakuza Like a Dragon. And now, we're doing our kind of like Rambo thing where we're playing around with subtitles, moving that and changing what the title is by moving the whole title around. So now everything will be, going forward, presumably will be called Like a Dragon something or other. I suspect this also means that we'll start getting the actual subtitles, because these games have had subtitles in Japan since Yakuza 4, or Ryuga Gotoku 4, / Like a Dragon 4, however you want to refer to it. And those subtitles have always been missing outside of 6, that it did get called The Song of Life over here, which was like the one that they decided to bring that over. It in particular to me makes sense that you would not call this game also Yakuza Ishin, because I haven't played it, but I don't think it has anything to do with the Yakuza. Obviously, the Yakuza have existed historically in Japan in this period, but this is about like the Shinsengumi and the Tokugawa shogunate and that kind of stuff. It is not about the local Yakuza families in Kamurocho or wherever. So it particularly would not actually make sense to call this game Yakuza Ishin in any way, shape, or form. So it is a pretty logical title change. It will take a long time for me to get used to. I'm sure I'm going to just call them the Yakuza games for a while because it's a little bit easier to say. But yes, and also I was very, very excited and surprised to hear. Like, I had not heard anything about this game. This was not anything that had been leaked or rumored in any way, shape, or form. So it was a legitimate surprise watching the stream.
Yeah. So, at some point, I so want to catch up on all the Yakuza games. I want to play the Judgment games. There's 7 Yakuza games before you get to the actual Yakuza 7, because there's also 0, and then there's 2 Judgment games. And I don't know, short of you and me starting another podcast, Weekly Suit Yakuza, and we do that, I don't know when I will have the time, but I want to find it. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a couple years to play through all of them, because I started with 0, and that was in like 2017, I think.
It's the kind of thing that I wish they were on Switch. That would make it easier for me. And if I ever get a Steam Deck, I think that's what my Steam Deck would be for. Would be like playing through the Yakuza games. That would be a good way to do it,
Yeah.
Anyways, let's go on.
Yeah, let's continue on with the rest of the announcements. So the next game they showed off was, this is a new game called Pacific Drive. This is a game that is from a new studio. I don't remember what the name of the studio is. I'm trying to see if it's on this website I'm looking at. They don't have it. But it's a new studio making a game. Oh, here it is. From Ironwood Studios. So it's their first game. And it looks like kind of like a triple I indie, if you want to use that terrible phrase. It'll be on PS5 and PC, and it's a pretty cool trailer. It's like a station wagon in the Pacific Northwest of America, driving through like this kind of forested area, and then all of a sudden some sort of like cataclysm happens, and there's this massive storm, and there's like rain, and things are getting thrown around. The earth starts ripping apart, and the person driving the station wagon is trying to like desperately navigate this sort of like weird hellscape that has opened up in front of them. And at the end of the trailer, the station wagon stops on this hill, and the camera zooms out and sees this like weird sort of crazy fucking space black hole laser shit happening in the distance as the title comes up. It's a pretty cool trailer with pretty cool vibes. Like, it doesn't give you a very clear specific idea of what the game is, other than it will clearly have driving in it. But I usually kind of, at this point, a lot of the sort of more indie game trailers bleed together a lot for me, because I feel like you see so many of them. This one actually kind of stood out, partially because there weren't a bunch of other indie games at the show, so this one kind of got like a lot of atmosphere in the room to kind of show itself off.
I like this announcement. I think it's a really cool looking trailer. It's very unique. At the very least, this is the kind of thing I like to see. I feel like at a proper E3, this one would have gotten a lot of chatter as like the surprise of the day, you know?
Yeah, it's exactly that kind of thing. Then we also got a trailer for a game that they actually showed, I think, last year at a PS5 thing, which at that point was called Project Eve. I believe it's a Korean game that is like very Devil May Cry-esque. It's some like cool lady with swords and shit fighting giant monsters. That game has been retitled Stellar Blade, which I think is a better title than Project Eve, particularly for a big character action game thing. Cool trailer. Like, I like character action games, so I thought that game looked good the last time they showed it. I think it still looks like a cool, if you like Devil May Cry, that might be a thing to pay attention to. It looks pretty cool. Next up, we had a mech trailer for a mech game called Sin Duality, which is a very Japanese game trailer, or game style title. Sin Duality, I don't know exactly what that means. It was a like weird AI lady who's narrating to you for a lot of the trailer, and it looks like it's kind of a mech game with maybe a sort of like open world survival edge to it. It was not particularly clear exactly what the game is. But I like mechs, and so they showed some cool mech stuff. I think it maybe was Ishikawa Yui played the AI lady who's like 2B in Nier Automata. I'm not 100% sure. If it's not her, it's someone that sounds a lot like her, and it's like, oh, that's cool. I like AI ladies. I like giant mechs. That might be a game to put on your radar.
Yeah, I liked this. The mech action looked cool, so we'll see. Yeah. It is anime as fuck, so there you go.
Yeah, I don't really want to talk about it, but I'm going to mention it. They did show a thing for that Hogwarts game. I don't.
They showed like 10 seconds. Yeah. It's not worth.
Yeah,
saying.
It's not worth talking about. It was there. It was technically shown. The big thing I want to talk about, though, this was for me the highlight of the show, is Team Ninja announced a new game called Rise of the Ronin, which is a Meiji period set open world action game. Where you play as a Ronin, presumably, some sort of masterless samurai dealing with the Bakumatsu, or the end of the Tokugawa shogunate. It looks more open-worldy based on the brief trailer. It's a very cinematic trailer that does show some gameplay stuff, but it's very heavily cut, so it doesn't give you a clear picture of the game. But there's a part where the guy jumps off of a cliff and, like, over a, like, at that point modernized Japanese city, obviously not a modern Japanese city, but modern for the mid to late 1800s, and he kind of opens up this crazy Da Vinci looking like wing thing with bamboo and all this stuff, and he starts gliding. That to me says, hey, this is going to be more of a seamless open world than, say, the Neo games, which are the other games made by Team Ninja. This game is being directed by the guy who was the director for Neo 1 and 2, whereas Wolong Fallen Dynasty, which is the Neo-esque Romance of the Three Kingdoms set game, is being made by someone who I think was like a junior director or something. Someone like that, like, moved up the ladder to make that Wolong game. This is the guy who made the Neo games, is making this Rise of the Ronin game. It is an awesome looking trailer. It is an amazing pitch. It just has so much style. Team Ninja, since the release of Neo, has been absolutely kicking ass. This kind of like modern version of that studio. And it was that thing where, like, it took all the sting out of losing Meiji era set Assassin's Creed. Instead, you can go do your Warring States thing, Ubisoft. I don't give a shit. Team Ninja is giving us a Meiji period set open world samurai action game. And that is what I want. And they are giving it to us.
It looks so good. And in addition to the glider thing, he's also riding a horse in a couple shots. So it looks like you'll get a horse. And yeah, I think there's this... I think a lot of Americans have this complete misperception of Japanese history that there were no, like, modern buildings until, like, after the war or something. And so that section where you're in the city, like, that's what I would expect from an actual Assassin's Creed Japan game.
Yes.
Where you're in a modernizing city with, like, brick streets and things like that. But they don't... Assassin's Creed isn't doing that. But Team Ninja is, and frankly, I'd rather Team Ninja do it. They're more talented at this kind of thing, and I'm very excited for this game. It looks great.
Yeah, and yeah, you just get all that fun Meiji period stuff of this, like, mix of, like, traditional Japanese fashion and, like, Western fashion that's coming in, and hairstyles and all of that. Like, it's one of the reasons why it's a really fascinating historical period, is it's just this giant cultural, like, mishmash as these things are colliding together in fashion and style and technology and philosophy and all and art and all that kind of stuff. And the brief glimpses you get of it in this trailer looks like it's very interested in all those elements. This will also be a next-gen exclusive. They said PS5 console exclusive. I assume that means at the very least it is coming to PC as well. And so it definitely looks next-gen-y. And they said 2024, which I saw a lot of people online being like, you can't announce a game for 2024. And I was like, I think a lot of people have not let it sunk in that we're getting close to the end of 2022. So 2020, if this comes out, say, February 2024, which Neo 1 and 2 both came out in February, that is not that well. That's like 15 months away. So if that's
very
they're targeting,
reasonable window, yeah.
If that's what they're targeting, I'm pretty excited. That to me, this was like easily the highlight of all the games announced. Partially because Wolong Fallen Dynasty, I just like assumed, this is the new Team Ninja game. then whatever their next game is going to be like a ways off. And now we clearly know that Team Ninja has become a 2-team studio now, because Wo Long Fallen Dynasty will come out sometime within the next year, and this game will be like a year plus. And so that's very exciting that they've clearly sort of expanded to make 2 games simultaneously.
Yeah, that looks awesome. Is Wo Long Fallen Dynasty kind of like in the same realm as Neo and Neo 2 in terms of gameplay?
Yes.
Do we know?
That's much more Neo-ish. I think it's more action-y.
Okay.
So it doesn't have like all the stances and stuff, but it is not an open world game or anything. It is like hub world and like going into like specific zones like Neo is and that kind of stuff.
Oh, there's a demo out right now.
Yes.
Up until September 26th.
Not had time to play the demo. That's something I'm planning on doing later today. So yes. But Wo Long Fallen Dynasty is in like the near term. That game is going to be coming out.
Right. That game looks good. That's something I missed. Neo 1 and 2. At some point I would like to play these. It looks like we don't have a release date for it yet, but there you go.
Yep. And then the last thing that Sony showed, the second to last thing they showed was a trailer for the limited edition controller for God of War Ragnarok, which I was kind of hoping would be the only thing they'd show for God of War Ragnarok, because that would have been hilarious if everyone's sitting there thinking, oh, we're going to get a big cool God of War trailer, and then it's like, and it's a good looking controller, but here's the controller, the fancy PS5 controller for God of War. So they showed that, and then they showed an actual God of War trailer, which I think is maybe the best video game trailer I've seen in years. Did you watch the God of War Ragnarok trailer, Jonathan?
No, I've watched almost no marketing for God of War Ragnarok. I was just watching it right now. I had the stream up while we were talking, and I saw it on mute. And then I did see the moment where Christopher Judge is the actor. Kratos orders his son to shoot the arrow, or his son Atreus to shoot the arrow up into the like eclipse sun, and I'm like, that's pretty fucking cool. But yeah, I'll need to watch the full thing if you say it's that good.
It's just like, it's a very cinematic-y trailer. It's all in-game footage, but it's cut like a movie trailer, but it's just so well cut together. It's just as like a trailer, like in terms of editing and all that kind of stuff. It's so fucking good. It's very exciting. God of War has always cut together really good trailers because the very like epic kind of mythic scale those games operate at lends itself to really cool imagery for trailers. But God of War Ragnarok, this trailer like really leverages that home. Like I think if you were someone who I think this game is kind of sneaking up on a lot of people because the marketing has not been like really out in front of us for this game in the way you maybe would expect for a big AAA game. So I feel like there was a lot of buzz from this trailer online because I think it's just if you have not been like us replaying that God of War 2018 game and stuff like that, you maybe have forgotten how good it is and like how interesting the story is and the setting and the style and all that is so like epic in that like proper use of the term. And then you see this trailer where you have, as you pointed out, probably the best sequence in the trailer, which is Atreus shooting an arrow at the sun, and then one of the giant hounds or wolves in Norse mythology, that one of them chases the sun and one of them chases the moon, and the one that chases the sun goes running off into the sky and like splits the sky apart into the night, and it's like one of the most heavy metal fucking things you've seen in a long time. And the trailer is just stock full of all that kind of stuff. It doesn't feel spoilery in any way. Like, it only gives you vague hints at like some of the story, mostly stuff if you've seen the like earlier trailer they showed, where you know that like Tyr is going to be in the game and that kind of stuff. They show a little bit of Thor right at the end. It's just a really, really kick-ass trailer. So if people have not watched it, I would recommend it. Even if you're not interested in playing the game, I think it would just be a fun trailer to watch because it is so well edited together, and the Bear McCreary God of War theme is so good. It plays on trailers extremely well.
Look, y'all know I love God of War. Very excited for this game. I do want to criticize one thing. I'm looking at that controller right now. That is the worst special edition controller I've ever seen. That is the ugliest piece of shit. It looks like a bad render from Redbubble. Not like an actual thing you would buy that someone handcrafted and looked good. It's just a DualSense with the arms are a solid dark blue. There's no gradient, there's no texture, just a solid dark. It looks like a Microsoft Paint find and replace. And then the touchpad is white with the two wolves on it. And again, it looks like a sticker that you bought like from an Amazon seller for $3.99. And I just have to criticize Sony for this. The DualSense is a phenomenal video game controller. It is the best controller that's ever shipped with a console. It has every design of it is ugly. and I don't know why they can't make a good alternate edition version of it. I have the blue one here. It's fine, but it's just they put a weird kind of ocean blue texture on it and called it a day. There's nothing else to it. Their red is a shitty shade of red. They have a black one. The black one's the only one that looks okay because it's just black, but they didn't do anything like give you colors on the buttons or anything. I don't know why they can't make a cool-looking controller for the DualSense. Xbox is over here. They've got a million special editions that look great. They've got gradient colors, and they've got transparency, and they've got different textures. The DualSense, I don't know what's going on. All their controllers look bad. They should be able to do better than this. That's fucking pathetic.
I think it looks fine. I don't know. I like it.
I
don't feel strongly.
Asking you to pay $70 for that is an absolute insult. That looks terrible.
Okay.
Yeah. It does.
Sure.
It's just tweet at us. Let me know. Let me know if you agree with me or with Sean. If you're smart or stupid.
Yeah, I think the controller looks fine. I like the coloring. I'm not going to buy it, but I think it looks okay.
Yeah. I've got another beef with Sony going on
yes.
right now, which is that their controllers keep breaking on me. And they say they have a warranty, but they don't actually, because you can't access it. So there is no warranty. It's a lie. I feel like there should be a class action suit in there somewhere.
No, see, Jonathan, really you're misunderstanding. It's not a warranty. It's warrant-E. It's kind of warrant. It's warrant-E. It's not a warranty. Yeah. It's warrant-ish, one might say.
Warrant-ish. All right. What else, Sean? So that was the state of play. I will say
yes.
That's better than the Nintendo Direct. It was half as long, and I think there were twice as many interesting announcements. So there you go.
Yeah, good stuff. The very smooth thing. They also here's the one thing I didn't mention. This is like the one piece of fat on it. Was there's a PlayStation rewards program called PlayStation Stars that if you want to sign up for that, you'll get stuff. That was the one thing I didn't mention. If you want to do that, they're doing a rewards program. There you go.
Yay.
So the next thing to talk about is the day after that, there was the RGG Summit. The Yuga Gotoku Studios did their own thing the day after the State of Play to show off some of their Like a Dragon game stuff. Not Yakuza games, because it's not what they're called anymore. So they showed a little bit more of Like a Dragon Ishin, but the big thing is, one, they showed an announcement trailer for Like a Dragon 8, the sequel to Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon. We're getting Like a Dragon 8 or Yuga Gotoku 8, confirming that stuff that we basically already knew. That game will continue to be turn-based. They didn't show any of the combat or anything. It's a very much an announcement trailer. But that will still be a turn-based game. You will have Kasuke Ichiban as the main character, but Kiryu will be coming back. So Kiryu will be a secondary protagonist in that game. They said he will be getting his own party, so I think implying that it will be kind of like Yakuza 0, where you will be cutting between those two characters. Kiryu has a sick K-pop look. His hair is white in the trailer, and it's like kind of cut, it's like down on his hair instead of the kind of coif he normally has. They said that that you will find out what's going on with Kiryu's new look if you play through Like a Dragon 8. So that we got that cool announcement trailer.
Yeah, how do you feel about it with bringing Kiryu back and all that kind of stuff?
I'm into it. Like, I think, like, at first, I was a little bit iffy on it because it just felt like they did a good job making kind of a clean break with Like a Dragon 7. But I think it was when they said that he's going to be getting his own party, immediately I was just imagining all the stuff you get up to in Like a Dragon 7, or Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon. But like getting the Kiryu side of that and like having him have his own buddies and being able to change jobs and like all of the mechanical stuff they do, but being able to do that with like Kiryu and having like who he is as a character sort of affect those things for his side of it. That to me is incredibly appealing, and I like the idea. You know, Kiryu is like one of my favorite video game characters ever. So it's like, should they maybe, in a very technical way, let him have like his nice exit in 6 and then his cameo in 7? Sure. But also, do I want to play a turn-based Yakuza game with Kiryu? Yes. Yeah, I do. I ain't too good for that. I'm not going to put up my nose at being able to do that. So yeah. And I think they did a good enough job of integrating him into the 7th game that for people who kind of came in with that game, I don't think it will be like off-putting to have him in the sequel.
that was going to be my only like question is like how are they going to handle that, because I think it was probably very necessary for Yakuza to have a place where newcomers could come on board, given the sheer number of games they've had so far. And, you know, Like a Dragon worked 110% for me in that fashion. It's just a newcomer. And yeah, I liked Kiryu from the very small amount I saw of him in that game. So I'm all on board for it. It's all good. And whenever that game comes out, it'll be one of the best games of its year. I'm excited.
Yes. Well, before that game comes out, if you want some more Kiryu, they did announce another new game, Like a Dragon Gaiden meaning side story, The Man Who Erased His Name. And they showed a trailer for this. It is Kiryu. It is set between 7 and 8, it's set between 6 and 7, maybe potentially overlapping with 7, but from Kiryu's perspective, this is going to be a classic style combat, like action brawler combat thing. So this one will not be turn-based, but I'm happy with that. I'll take more action-y stuff with Kiryu. And the trailer shows him after the events of Yakuza 6, where, as you know, slight spoilers for the Yakuza 6, but if you've played 7, you know what this is. He sort of fakes his death, and he is off the radar, right? So he has, as the subtitle says, a man who has erased his name. He has, like, sort of disappeared into the cracks of society because he has had to. So he is, like, meditating at a Buddhist temple. It is the most Yakuza / Like a Dragon game trailer ever. It is very slow. It is just Kiryu meditating at a Buddhist temple, like sitting with his legs cross-legged, like folded on themselves. There's a Buddhist monk behind him who like has the little like rod or whatever that hits him on the back to like make sure he's meditating properly. And then after about 2 minutes of that, a guy comes in who is clearly like Yakuza or someone who's like part of the underworld of Japan. Who says that Kiryu needs to come in to do a job. Like, apparently he has been doing some kind of jobs for some organization. He's going to have to protect someone. And so they're calling him to do some sort of protection bodyguard type of work. And that is where the trailer ends in a very ominous fashion. And I will say again, you know, I understand if people feel that, like, they should have left Kiryu alone and they gave him an exit. I will also say that they give Kiryu an exit in literally every single Yakuza game other than arguably 0 because it's a prequel. And so it is not the first time they have decided, we're going to bring him back. Fuck it. And as soon as I started seeing this and I saw him in, like, this traditional, like, Buddhist robe just meditating at this temple, I'm like, yeah, fucking hell yeah, give it to me. Just give it to me. Give me Kiryu erasing his name. I forget what they call him, like Jodyu or something like that. He's got some like silly name that is a fake name that he's an alias he's working under at this temple. I am all for the Kiryu side story of what happened between 6 and 7, with him trying to erase himself in society. Just give me all the Yakuza shit. I'll take it forever.
I think it sounds great. I'm excited for it. I want to catch up on this series. God damn it! Maybe we do need to do this podcast. I don't know.
Sure, you know, hey, I don't know if I would have the time to play all those games again, but I probably remember. I'll watch some videos. We could do it.
Weekly Suit Yakuza coming 2023 from the Weekly Stuff podcast, or Like a Weekly Dragon. Yes, that's not a bad. That's not a bad name.
That's not a bad name for a podcast that would in no way be weekly.
No, you know, maybe it could be a short segment as I'm playing along, and we just say, Sean, this is the section of this game I played this week. Let's do our Like a Weekly Dragon check-in. We'll plan this off the podcast.
Yeah.
You know what? Tweet at me. Let me know if you'd listen to it. You know, I don't know. Is this a Patreon goal or something? We set that up again. You give us money. We do play Yakuza. I'll do that.
The fuck, that sounds like a good deal. Pay me money. I play Yakuza games. Please. That sounds a lot easier than teaching high school.
Sean, should I start a Patreon that just says, pay me money, I'll play Yakuza?
Yeah, we're not even making the podcast anymore. It's just, I'm just playing the Yakuza games on my own. Maybe I'll tweet about it sometimes. But, yeah. You know, just pay me some money and I'll go play the Yakuza games on my own time.
You know, we'll gauge enthusiasm for this online. But there's a lot of Yakuza stuff, and I would like to play it all at some point. There you go. Sean, what was next? We did State of Play, we did the RGG thing. What about Tokyo Game Show? Did we get anything cool out of that?
Not a huge amount of announcements of TGS itself. I feel like TGS, and this is kind of typically the case, like part of the reason why the Nintendo Direct and State of Play happened and the RGG Summit was to announce the things that were going to be at TGS, because TGS is like a more traditional trade show. It's not necessarily just like, here's all of our big announcements. There were a couple of things. There was, for me, the big thing was they had a really big section for Street Fighter 6. So Capcom showed a lot of Street Fighter 6 stuff. They showed a bunch of characters. I think they have now shown... Well, they've shown an image that has the full roster, but they have shown, like, a trailer, like, characters in trailers doing cool stuff for, I believe, all of the original Street Fighter II World Warriors now. So if you want to see, like, gnarly-ass Ken, who's, like, down on his luck and working a construction job, and he, like, Shoryuken's, like, falling fucking, like, beam or whatever at a construction site to save a man. That's how the trailer opens. It's pretty cool. Street Fighter 6 looks amazing. It continues to look incredible. They showed some of the single player, and it has a very Dragon Ball Xenoverse-esque kind of thing, I think, going on, where you can learn, you make your own custom character. There's a really detailed character creator. It looks like they've kind of taken the character creator from Monster Hunter, which if you played the Monster Hunter games, the modern ones, they have like a very detailed, complex character creator you can use. So they've taken that. And then you can learn your moves. So if you want to learn the Hadouken, you go train with Ryu, and then you learn like how to do a Shoryuken and Hadouken and that kind of stuff. You can do the spinning bird kick, the Chun-Li special move. So that feels like they're kind of borrowing a little bit of that kind of mentor thing from Xenoverse. There's like a mode that looks Final Fight-esque in the single player, where it's like a side-scrolling brawler more kind of thing, which looks really cool. Just in general, the single player looks extremely fully featured. They showed off the lobby, which is going to have a lobby mode that can hold up to 100 people, that can do tournaments. There will be rolling classic Capcom arcade games. They showed Final Fight and the original Street Fighter II. And so during, like, you know, they kind of said that, like, oh, every, like, few weeks or something, we'll roll out different ones that you can play in the lobby while you're hanging out. You can do crazy emotes and take screenshots and do dances and shit. Like, it seems like they're kind of making their whole kind of modern, like, big lobby metaverse-y kind of thing in Street Fighter 6, which looks very fun. There will be crazy extreme game rules mode types that they talked about. There you can, if you want to make a crazy soccer game where you're kicking a soccer ball at each other in Street Fighter and it explodes like a hot potato kind of thing, you can make custom game modes like that in Street Fighter 6. Like, their Street Fighter 6 trailer basically just looks like them saying, we know that the biggest criticism of 5 was that it was this very anemic release, that the only thing it did well was like competitive one-on-one, or, you know, obviously one-on-one, but like multiplayer, and that's it. It had no real story mode. It didn't have any extra modes. It had no real personality. It was just a well-made fighting game that you could play locally or online, and that was it. And they rolled up to Street Fighter 6 and said, we are going to make the like thickest, most fully featured ass fighting game like imaginable, and I am 110% here for it, because it is the thing that has like prevented me from getting into a lot of modern fighting games, is that they are so narrowly focused on their one multiplayer thing that I feel like they have abandoned a lot of like the first like single player stuff and the more kind of party stuff that fighting games had more in the early to mid 2000s. And it looks like 6 is like kind of really bringing that, not just like bringing back a little bit of that kind of mindset, but bringing back that mindset and like pushing it to the next level. This looks like the Halo 3 of fucking fighting games in terms of the amount of customization and modes on offer.
Yeah, I think it looks fantastic. That is definitely a game that when it comes out, we will both be picking it up and playing it and talking about it on the podcast. No doubt about that.
Yeah, it's an amazing trailer. Looks like a great game. And the only other big thing from, I say big thing, I think it's just a thing that I know that you and I are both interested in, Jonathan, is that Konami, which I know we all assume that Konami doesn't make any video games, but occasionally they do. You know, they do their Yu-Gi-Oh shit. They'll put something out every now and then. They're doing remasters of Suikoden 1 and 2, which will be remastered and released on everything PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, and PC. And these are like two real big classic, super beloved JRPGs that have not had good modern like ways to play them outside of obviously emulation. So it is. I know that we both are like interested in the Suikoden games, and so that announcement came out. I'm like, yeah, awesome. I really want to check out that franchise.
And even the initial releases in the West were pretty bad because the
Yeah.
English script is infamously awful, and they've completely redone the English scripts for these, so those are going to be better. Konami, actually, for all of their faults, some of their classic game releases have been really good. The Castlevania Anniversary Collection and then the Castlevania Advance Collection are both pretty fantastic. They've put out some good versions of other Castlevania games. This looks like a really good classic game collection. So they're doing a decent job with all of that, and that's nice to see.
Yeah, but I think that was about the major stuff. I don't know if you saw anything else at TGS you wanted to talk about.
Small things I saw. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is getting a PS5 and Xbox Series X upgrade. That's free if you already own the game. And they are doing a second season of DLC, including they're doing a Bardock DLC. I'm curious to see if that will follow the TV special or the Broly movie, because those are very different.
They showed a trailer. It is definitely the TV special, because it is like the opening of that TV special of him and his squad landing on that planet, and Bardock gets out and he's clearly ready to go murder motherfuckers. I watched that. I was like, it's interesting that we're still doing episode of Bardock stuff when we have like the new canon or whatever of Dragon Ball from the movie.
Yes. I mean, I will say that version of Bardock is more video game friendly.
Yes,
so
that's certainly true. Yeah.
But I never played all of Kakarot, and knowing that they're doing this, that just tells me like, oh, that's when I will try to play Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. There will be this cool PS5 upgrade, and I do own it on PS4. I just never got that far in it. Not because I didn't like it, but just because other things got in the way. And I know you really liked that game.
Yeah,
so.
That's a very good game. Yeah, and I never played the DLC, so it might be a time. I never picked it up either, so it might be a time to, when that PS5 version comes out, pick up that DLC, because I know they did like all the Beerus stuff in some like the Super movies as DLC. So yeah.
The only other thing I saw, One Piece Odyssey is a game I'm really looking forward to. That's the new One Piece game that is a JRPG. It's basically Dragon Quest, but with One Piece. Looking pretty good. That's coming out in January. That had been previewed for a while, but hadn't had a date. And then, I had the Yakuza stuff. I had the Suikoden stuff. But yeah, there were a lot of announcements and a lot of good stuff there.
Yes, and again, like all the I feel like the big TGS stuff really was actually in that Direct and the RGC Summit and the State of Play. Because all those games they showed more stuff of at TGS.
Do you want to go ahead and finish this episode up talking about Genshin Impact?
Yes, that is a good point. So yes, shortly after that, just to keep the fucking crazy video game news coming, Hoyoverse did their 3.1 live stream thing. They do these like an hour-long live stream for all their major updates. This one is also, I think this is the last one before the second anniversary of the game, so they did a bit more like extra stuff. This one also was live on YouTube. At least the Japanese version was live on YouTube, and if you like the Japanese voice actors, there's some interviews and stuff with Japanese voice actors in the Japanese version, because I know that they've never really done these updates like with Japanese subtitles or anything. They've done English versions, and they're originally in Chinese. So I actually watched the Japanese one because I heard that there were going to be some of the interviews with the cast in there. But the main things that they announced, we'll get to the big thing a little bit, but it's, 3.1 looks fucking awesome. It is a crazy good fucking trailer. They're adding in the desert area, which I think we knew. They're adding in new characters like Sinnoh, Candace, and the Nilo who was in the 3.0 update, is going to be in there, as well as a new character. The next part of the Majin Nimu, or the big like Archon mission or whatever. But also something I don't think anybody really expected is that they're doing a big festival in the second half of the update with the Mondstadt characters, which I was very happy to see. So you're going to be able to go to Mondstadt. There's going to be like a big story thing. It looks like it's to the level of the Lantern Rite Festival stuff that we did with Liyue, and getting some big character stuff there. And I was like, it's awesome to get new stuff, and then also let's revisit all those old characters that they have not had, like with the main cast of Mondstadt, not some of like the side, stuff like Fischl and Mona that we got, or Clay, but with characters like Jean and Diluc and Gaia. We haven't even got anything new with that main group in a really long time, and so I was really happy to see that also.
Yeah. All looks good. Lots of characters I'm excited to roll for, and I won't be able to do all of them, so I'll have to pick and choose, including we're getting an Albedo rerun, and I've wanted Albedo so I can make my all Geo Boys team.
Yes.
But there's a bunch of other new characters too. They all look good. I will do the trials of them and decide what I want.
Yes, yeah, they all look really cool. Nilo's water character, Sinnoh, looks like he's like a jacked up version of Razor. Candace has a shield, which is cool in her moves.
Yeah.
They also announced that they're going to do another online Genshin Impact concert, which is, and they showed like some live music stuff that is one of those places where you remember that this is like one of the highest grossing games in terms of revenue in the world, because it's just like how well produced this whole video of like all these musicians, many of them, you know, from the Middle East, in this sort of like rainforest with these traditional Middle Eastern instruments, playing one of the main themes from Sumeru. It is like this incredible video. This like, man, they make a lot of money. Just this is like a promotional video to announce the big elaborate online concert they're going to do that you will be able to watch for free. I watched the one they did for the 1-year anniversary. And it was amazing. And it was like, it looked incredibly expensive. And it was used like 2 different philharmonic orchestras on different sides of the world. And like modern bands like participated and did covers of like some of the character themes. Like they're doing all that crazy shit. That looks awesome. Just to give one other thing before we get to, I know the big announcement that everyone wants to hear us talk about. They also teased very briefly, just to like show off almost, that in the 3.3 update, they're going to be integrating a Magic the Gathering style card game into Genshin Impact. They showed that very briefly. So it's like, if you feel like they're, you know, that there, you know, there are other game modes and video games that they could just put into Genshin Impact, they know, and they're working on that also, so that Genshin Impact is the only video game you ever have to play. So they're putting in a Magic style looking trading card game that will be part of the 3.3 update that they have been teasing in, because it's like an in-universe card game that they have referenced in some of the story stuff. It's like called like Invocation or something like that. You know, Arataki Ito is a big fan. He talks about it sometimes, and they'll do that in 3.3. So, you know, Genshin Impact will consume all of our lives forever. That was them declaring that, including in the video game and in something not in the video game, because the big, very expensive-looking announcement was they showed a promotional video announcing a partnership, a collaboration between Hoyoverse and the Japanese animation studio Ufotable, best known for Kimetsu no Yaiba and the Fate series, one of the most premier animation studios from Japan. And it was a very gorgeous 3-minute animated video blending 2D animation and 3D, but in a way that looks like very unique. That is not exactly the Ufotable look. It looks like it's like very much its own thing. This very like sprawling, you know, vistas and landscapes that the camera, you know, like admiringly looks at, very clearly, like celebrating kind of the world of Tewat, and then settling on the 2 twins, the travelers, in the trailer, announcing what they call a long-term animation collaboration, is I think how I would translate how it was written, at least in Japanese. And then afterwards, one of the Chinese developers talking about it called it a series, an animated series. So it is not 100% clear, like, is this a TV show? Is it a series of OVAs? Like, exactly what it is. But it seems clear that it is like some sort of series of anime. Like, hopefully like an actual, like, hey, let's do 2 cores of Genshin Impact, at the bare minimum, something that is more elaborate than just like, we're going to do some shorts or something like that. Based on the wording, that seems like what they're doing. And that is extremely exciting, to say the least.
It is the absolute best case scenario, nth degree, oh my god, they did it thing. It's absolutely wild. This is who you would choose if you were going to do it. Mm-hmm. It's, if you could choose, I mean, any anime studio would have fun with it, but Ufotable is fucking Ufotable. And the idea that Ufotable is going to spend the next few years alternating between Kimetsu no Yaiba and Genshin Impact, the most popular manga/anime in Japan, and the most popular video game in the world, I don't know. When they're done with both of those projects, they're just going to have all the money. That's very crazy for them. But it's wild. I think it looks amazing. That trailer is fantastic, just as kind of a mood piece, a kind of like pitch of the visuals they might be going with. I'm super curious, and I don't know how much we've detailed it on the podcast, but Japanimation Station, our anime podcast, we're currently finishing up our Full Metal Alchemist series. But I've said this before, but our plan is the second series we're covering is we're doing an Ufotable series where we're going to do all of the Fate Stay Night and then all of the Garden of Sinners stuff together. And that was not in reaction to this announcement. That's just purely a coincidence. We've been planning that in our meetings and stuff for months now. But yeah, that's now that has an extra kind of resonance to it, I think, because they're doing Genshin.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it 1,000% sense as like the studio that Hoyoverse would go to, because it's like very clear that like particularly the Fate stuff is a clear influence on Hoyoverse and some of their like aesthetics. Some of their like in-game animated cutscenes I think are clearly like trying to emulate some of the things that Ufotable does, just in Genshin with like 3D animated character models, the way they do like impact frames and stuff like that. Like if you watch the opening cutscene to Genshin Impact where the travelers fight the god voiced by Kugimi Orie, some of like the way that they do the impacts with like the harsh white explosions and stuff like that, and things get distorted, very clearly pulling from some of the things that Ufotable does. And I just think some of their sensibility reminds me of some like the Fate stuff, which obviously we'll be able to talk about that when we get to it in Japanimation Station. But yeah, I think it's a thing we've talked about before of how cool it would be to get an anime of Genshin Impact and how well that could be adapted and how interesting it would be to see the story adapted into that form. And this is exactly the studio that I would want to do it. So I'm very excited. I'm curious like what the timetable will be, what exact form it will take. Again, is this going to be like a 2-core thing that will, depending on how successful it is, like get renewed? Like a lot of those details are not out there. This is a very kind of general announcement, just announcing the collaboration itself. But it is looking good, like Genshin Impact is very much on the rise still, even now effectively 2 years after its release. It is continuing to expand and go up to higher and greater heights, Yeah.
There's a lot of video games coming out, Sean.
Yep.
The rest of this year is actually pretty busy. I'm just looking through the release calendar. I have a lot I want to play, and I don't know how I'm going to get through it all. So there you go. This was fun to kind of clear the table with all this new shit, Sean, because there's a lot. Holy crap.
Yes, yeah. It feels like, as we kind of talked about at the top of the podcast, it has been weird for the past couple of years with video games. It's been weird with everything for the past couple of years, yes. All in like similar and unique ways. But it does feel like things were almost like congested. There was like so few new announcements and stuff. Like a lot of this year has been pretty barren for releases, particularly on the Sony and Xbox side. And like it feels like there is something very exciting about the last week, just being like, yes, video games are happening. Here's cool announcements. Here's cool video games you've never heard of. You're finally seeing some stuff that has been rumored for a while getting out there. It is exciting to be excited about video games again, and that was very much how I felt coming out of a lot of last week. Yep,
absolutely. So just to fill you guys in really quick on what's coming up in the weeks to come on the Weekly Stuff podcast, next week, James Cameron's Avatar is coming back to theaters in the U.S., and we have been wanting to do some kind of Avatar memorial podcast at some retrospective podcast. For some reason, the word memorial feels right. A retrospective podcast before the sequel comes out. Mostly because I just want to go back and be like, what are my thoughts on that movie? Yes. I don't know. And so we are going to be talking about it next week. So you can go see the movie in theaters or watch it at home. We will be reviewing that for next Monday's podcast. Like it's a brand new thing, the Avatar podcast. I'll have to do the Avatar podcast at, asterisk, not the Nickelodeon thing.
Yes.
So it's very confusing. And then the week after that, we will be doing Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood Part 2 on Japanimation Station, finishing up that series. And we'll see where we go from there. But we have many, many things coming down the pipe. And I'm excited to get to all of it. But next week, Blue People.
I've just got to go get my 3D TV out.